It's Friday, May 3rd, and welcome to Covering Our Bases. From Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. Now, as we cover our bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who just doesn't have the time to follow the other 29 teams around the league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry of Major League Baseball to be present at all times. He's NL Dan, I'm AL Warren, and Dan, the officiating so far for these games has been especially sus in this season, man. Beyond blown calls on strikes and balls left and right, we're seeing games getting ended incorrectly. I'm looking at the end of the Angels and Orioles rubber match this past Wednesday, and ejections that are literally unjustified. And I think you have one just recently between the Mets and the Cubs, too. How about Aaron Boone getting unfairly ejected during the Yankees' loss to the Athletics on last Monday, thanks to a heckling fan? Dan, the buzz around robotic umps grows after circumstances like these are carried out. How do you feel about the officiating at this point in our season, and what's the path to more consistent accountability? Dan, tell me, Dan.
Oh man, I wish I had all the answers for you, Warren, but I know what you're saying. I've been noticing it too, and I don't think it's necessarily new, but it's frustrating to see in a sport that's, the players are working so hard to perfect in every little minute way that the impact an umpire has is massive, and a mistake can go a long way in changing the decision of a game and a season over the course of the rest of the season. So uh you mentioned the robo umps, and they are testing the robo umps in AAA for the second consecutive year. ABS, it's known as the automatic balls and strikes system. It still requires an umpire to be there behind the plate to basically act as the replay. If there's any call that a manager wants to challenge, they have 2 seconds to challenge it. And they've been working on the zone, refining it. Essentially, it sounds pretty cool, Warren. It's a zone that's going to change for each hitter uniquely. So you can imagine it being like a baseball width above the hip where the belt would be, and probably a baseball width below the knee or somewhere generally in there. But depending on the height and even your stance, it's going to affect your zone, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. It's cool. We definitely will see it in MLB. That's why they're testing it in AAA. But a lot of these other decisions are just the human element of the game, right? Things that can't be challenged, things that can't be reviewed. And you mentioned the ejection with Aaron Boone. And that stood out to me because, like you mentioned, it was definitely just wrong. It was a mistake. It seemed like Booney got a warning early in this game, and he got a warning from the umpire behind the plate, and then there's video of him like being like, all right, he gets back into the dugout, he doesn't argue anything, and then all of a sudden after another pitch goes probably a little wider of the strike zone than
Screw you up!
Yeah, the calls start coming in from the crowd, and the ump just turns and throws Booney out of the game. And they tried to argue it, but at that point it was too late. And I thought this was interesting, Warren. So because sometimes umps, there's a lot of pressure that they're under, and they make a bad call, and they're not going to back down, right? They're not going to change their mind. So I looked into this guy.
Yeah, tell me all about this. I'm so excited.
So Hunter Wendisled, if I'm saying that correctly, is the umpire. And to be honest, Warren, he doesn't have a large history of ejections. He only had 4 in 2022. He had a bit more in 2023, and most of them were pretty legit. But this is his first one of the year against Booney. And like we mentioned, it was definitely just he misheard and even kind of admitted that he just heard someone yelling and he's thrown him out, and that's it. It's done now. So
yeah, exactly.
I found it interesting, Warren, looking back at an ejection that this same umpire made last year because of. Sorry, let me just check the name. Last year, this same umpire ejected a player slash coach now for the Colorado Rockies for arguing a checked call from the dugout. And he didn't get a warning or
Mm,
anything beforehand. He just kind of called them out from the third base line. This wasn't the home plate umpire. This was the
wow.
third base umpire. So kind of soft, and that's kind of the vibe that I got from this ejection. And now to see this again this year, it's kind of like a repeat instance for me. So like I said, this is a guy that doesn't really call a whole lot of ejections, but when he does, it's things like this. And he does have a history of calling out managers for arguing little things. So that element of the game isn't going to go away even if we bring in robot umps, right? And you have so many of these other plays that can't be challenged or reviewed, and you're leaving so much power in the hands of the umpires. And these things sometimes seem so small and they can have such a large effect on the game. So I don't know. As far as accountability goes, Warren, I'm not sure what else we can do to change anything like this. Of course, from the umpire's perspective, it'd be better if they just didn't argue. But to be
Yeah,
honest,
really.
the arguing works sometimes, doesn't it? Like when they get out there and they start arguing balls and strikes, and a manager gets ejected. I mean, it's not that their zone's going to change, but that umpire is definitely a little more aware of it the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Gosh, I have yet to really understand the psychology of allowing yourself to get tossed out. You're so mad over something. Like, I understand going to bat for your guys, and as somebody who has his own angry streak from time to time, like, I understand getting that mad. But, like, I don't know. If I'm on TV and they're telling me this isn't going to change, I'm like, you know what? I'm mad. I'll tell the boys backstage, but I'm not going to make a show of myself. That's what I've always felt like is kind of weird about it. But hey, you want to traumatize the umpire so he thinks about it. Okay, I get that. Interesting tradition. And okay, I've just never had it really broken down for me like that. But when you were saying about this robo ump and the fact that an umpire is going to have to, still be present somewhere, it makes me think every field might get like a specific like umpire hut, like an umpire
Mm,
cage, or some sort of like in theme vessel where the umpire will literally step out to eject people and they'll be like the final boss of the game. I think it'll add a certain showmanship to Major League Baseball. I think all
I
of
like
the
it.
yeah, you don't you think?
Should
Like
put it
let's
right
have
behind home plate, like a little door, like in hockey, and then you're right. They have to like run out onto the field and get whoever they're ejecting.
dude, bonus points if there's fog machines to
Oh
present
yeah,
this. Yeah, and I want the most epic walkout experience. Somebody's got to have the Galactic Empire's, Death March. Dun, 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 dun. It's got to be the one in New York because I think that's the other reason why we use that song earlier in our
definitely.
conversations. Hey, but these conversations have been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming back from a lengthy pause. You came out to Vegas. You had a great weekend, and I'm glad you got to visit. But we've got a lot of baseball to catch up on today, guys. So we thought we continue to play with our format a little bit. Thanks for being patient with us while we tried this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. So what we've decided to do this week is power rank the teams now, about a month into the season, power rank them at this point. But we're doing it in a serpentine draft style. Okay. We're going to start by calling out our sinkers since the last time Dan and I spoke. We're going to call out our sinkers one by one here from the first 30 games at this point, I suppose. And now, after that, we're going to just kind of start power ranking the teams jointly, guys. Okay. There will be disagreements here, is the goal. We want somebody to be let down by how little their counterpart sees in one club, or the vice versa. Maybe there's too much being seen in another. It's really exciting to see where all the teams will land, and if Dan and I are too close, then this experiment failed, and thanks for coming along for the ride. So with that taken into account, Dan had the brilliant idea of how we decided who picked the first, or really the worst team in the league. Dan, tell us what you decided we should do, because I think it strokes my ego.
Yeah, man. I mean, the honor should go to, I think, between you and I, the best way to decide it is the teams that we root for. So why not make it every time we tune in, whichever one of our teams has the better record, that person will have the honor of picking the worst team in the rankings for that week. And, to start us off this week, goes without saying, Warren, the Mariners, the better record. So you can start us off for the first time in the new format.
Oh man, it's an honor to pick the worst team in the league to begin our weekly discussions. Truly and completely. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and pick my worst team in the league as the Tampa Bay Rays. I have them as one of my key sinkers, most definitely, and I'm calling them out as the worst. Uh, Bottom line, and it's just because their offense really isn't doing anything to script whatsoever. They went 2-8, especially since you and I last chatted, Dan, and they sit now 14-18, solidly outside a playoff window. As early as it is to think about it, it's so much fun to do so. It's baseball. Let's have some fun. They split with the Angels in a battle of subpar AL hopefuls. They lose 2 of 3 to the Yankees and 2 of 3 to the Tigers before the White Sox, Dan, sweep them.
What?
Ow! I know! No wonder they didn't have the momentum to stave off the Brewers, who handed them another series loss. So basically, the split with the Angels was actually their highlight this week. And so that
Yikes.
really means they have to be a sinker. Like, that can't be your highlight. I'm sorry. No way. What do you think, Dan? Am I out of line? Did the Rays have the worst week? I just feel it in my gut that they did.
Man, somebody had to lose to Chicago, but getting swept and doing it like looking bad is just not good. And yeah, you could make the argument, Warren, that Chicago is arguably worse than Miami and Colorado in a lot of ways. So even more kind of
Mm,
embarrassing for this Rays
mm-hmm.
team. They had a scrap in Milwaukee. I don't know if you saw. Tony Peralta threw a pitch at Jose Siri, kind of benches cleared for a while, suspensions on both sides. Didn't look intentional, kind of going back to our ump discussion, but Wandy got ejected and the manager and a bunch of other people. And yeah, so just injuries on top of already the Rays are dealing with Taj Bradley not being in the lineup, and Josh Lowe was working his way back and he had another setback. So it's not like there's reinforcements coming immediately for this team. And they're going into uncharted territory, Warren. We talked about last week how they're not the same team they were last year when they went off to that historic start, but
Mm-hmm.
4 games back this early in the season, it's not something the Rays have been in over 6 years. And this is the worst record they've had to start a season in 10 years. So, really not a good way with the Rays recently. And, a couple series coming up that should be pretty winnable, but I'm not super optimistic about them. I think having them as the first sinker is a wise decision.
Yeah, I think it gets worse for them. I think it's an uphill climb against the New York Mets with the way the momentum's flowing. So I don't know if that's going to be a good fit for them here in the next couple of days. And then the White Sox are their next team following that. So a lot of the momentum that they'll carry out of New York will determine if they're going to stand up to Chicago this time around. Now, we've seen how much, of course, a week can change the dynamic between two teams. But I really think it should happen here. Tampa Bay can't do that again and let the White Sox step all over them. That's just crazy. So, guys, remember, this isn't the worst team in the league. We know that. Okay, Tampa's not
Yeah.
the worst team in the league, but they had one of the worst weeks since Dan and I last spoke. And that makes this show unique to us, right? Okay, cool. You're following the theme now. Thanks. So Tampa was one of my sinkers, the worst team for me to call out of the group, which is saying something because I didn't pick the Angels. Go ahead, Dan. Your turn. Who's your first sinker and the 29th worst team in the league?
Well, Warren, since you threw Tampa out there, why don't we go ahead and keep it in Florida? I'm going to be a little ruthless, and I'm going to say, despite getting 4 wins in the last week and a half, it's the Miami Marlins for me.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's true, they almost put up the same amount of wins they had entering the week this far into the season. But with their 3 of those wins were against those Tampa Bay Rays that we talked about, and that takes a little bit of the shine off of it for me. Uh, AJ Puke is going to be put back into the bullpen after continuing to struggle in his starting role. 13.2 innings pitched and 9.22 ERA, 17 walks and 12 Ks before hitting a brief stint on the IL, but definitely not going to be back into a starting position. Hopefully he can settle back into that bullpen role and support that bullpen, which just lost Jose Luzardo. Sixto Sanchez is out of the bullpen because he's been forced to start as well, but now Braxton Garrett is coming back. So the rotating door just keeps going on for Miami on the pitching side of things. And Warren, I mean, listen, we know why everybody's here. When it's time to talk about Miami, is only one thing anybody cares about. I know you know what it is too, bud.
Come on, Sixto Sanchez?
No, dude, it's the burger counter. It's the BK burger promotion counter in Miami. What's the number at, Warren? Let's put it up there. What do they got? Miami managed 3 wins at home in the past week. 3 wins. They were only at 2 in our last episode, and now they've doubled it.
Fair.
More than doubled it. They're up to 5.
Hey.
Unbelievable. And it's funny that there's Tampa Bay supplied more burgers for Miami than anybody else because Jake Berger's been out of the lineup, Warren. He's rehabbing. Hopefully he'll be back soon. But yeah, the burger promotion is still right now to 5 wins and 15 losses. Not enough burgers in Miami, dude. I don't know what you think.
The whole city's going vegan. They're shutting down the whole concept of a classic hamburger. No more. Different promotion, please. Like, we'll have to think about a fitting counter, but it's just not working out. I can't wait till Burger comes back for this team, though. I'm sure it'll be helpful. I wondered if there's any chance when I was looking through the numbers that this team might come together again as Jake Burger returns. And it's cool to see them sweep the Rockies and see smiles on some of their faces. Like, I root for some of these guys. Some of them are really quality players. Luis ARRAEZ and Jazz Chisholm Jr. come up in conversation every week between you and I. But it's been Brian De La Cruz who's been the leader of this camp. So they're an endearing team, but they're lovable losers at the moment. And at least half this lineup is. Some of them are not likable at all. So they're destined to be the basement, and I think they do have uphill climbs amongst them no matter whom they face, including the Oakland Athletics, who are their next opponent. They play 3 in Oakland, and I don't think anybody deserves to be looking at Oakland as a team that will just lay down for them whatsoever. I just don't. And then the Dodgers are the next series as well to host these Miami Marlins, and that should also be a shellacking. So we're not going to be done talking about the Marlins struggling, I'm sure. Do you see a sucker punch coming up here? Like, I think Miami is a team that thinks they can beat a team like Oakland and will actually really struggle, don't you?
Yeah, it's the pitching side of thing is the thing that's really such a weakness for them. They'd have to go in and just really beat up a starter and slug their way through the game, and that's possible. Probably not in Oakland, to be honest. If they catch one of the roughed up Dodgers starters on an off day, but then that team can slug with anybody. So I don't know, Warren. I mean, I would hope they take 2 wins out of these next 6, but that is a little bright side, I think, for this team.
Harshness. But the reality is so true. How philosophical of me. Guys, moving on, it's my pick for the next team to hit the trash heap. And it's got to be the team that I didn't mention first that I really should have. The Angels. Oh my God. If it's the highlight that you split with the Angels, and the Angels themselves are the punchline. So let's go ahead and tell the joke. Yes, this week the Angels struggled. Are you surprised? they learned the news that Mike Trout is undergoing some type of knee surgery. It's not supposed to be season ending, says the public relations team, doing their absolute best to salvage any sort of positivity that this team could possibly have at this point. No, man. I'm sure this is going to turn out to be a really, really rough, scenario for the Angels. Yes, we understand Reed Detmers is a bright spot. I love Reed Detmers. Watching him pitch is a treat. It's true. Tyler Anderson's been a revelation starting off here in the season. No one expected this man to carry one of the better ERAs on the squad. Good for you. Bravo. However, you still went 2-8 this week. Oh no. Or a series of days since Dan and I last spoke. That's what we're talking about here, guys. And with so much failure, I have to put you amongst my sinkers. You have a negative 38 run differential, and you had one of the best sluggers on your team until he went down with this injury. So this is just not going to get better, Dan, is it? I don't know how much dirt you want me to kick on the Angels because I can keep going. But their school of youth and unproven talent just gets larger. I do want to give a shout out to a player I watched in spring training who impressed me. Love to see him at the major league level. Here, Adrianza. I do like how he performs at the plate, and he got some scrappy hits here in the early days of him being amongst the main roster. And so, congrats, kiddo. I'm sorry it's with the Angels, but eventually enough of you guys will put it all together at the same time to look competent. But it stinks you keep losing the nuclei that are your stars, right? Hey, good luck, Angels, but we know this is the basement that you have come to be, comfortable in. So fight your way out. Let's do it. It's time. You can't rely on Trout anymore. He's literally a glass cannon. Dan, take it away.
It's not fair, dude. What do the baseball gods have against Anaheim and Trout? Like this injury, like you said, he's probably going to come back, but he's probably not going to eclipse 100 games this season. That'd be the fourth time in 5 years. That would be the fourth time in 5 years that he hasn't been able to do that. And on top of that, Robert Stevenson, their fresh signing from this past offseason, his season is over. Anthony Rendon just started to heat up in the leadoff position, and now he pulled a hammy. And Warren, they're saying he'll be out a month, but it might be it might be a 2 to 8 months, constantly changing time frame. We know how that goes. So man,
he's got to take his family to Disney World real quick.
Yeah, exactly. 'Tis the season. It's just a shame. Like you mentioned, a bright spot. There was one for me. Zach Neto stepping up, really kind of impressing at shortstop. I gotta say. I mean, the rookies have all had flashes, but he's played in 30 games. Like it's at all 30 of the games for this team, and he's been right there. Only missed one, so really been impressive, and only going to get stronger, I'm sure, as the year goes on. And hey, Trout being out is more opportunities for more of these youth types we were talking about. And if that just helps with the evaluation for the Angels, then they can take it. I'm so confident in Ron Washington. You're right to have him as a sinker, but I still hope for good things from the team.
I want Miguel Sano to bounce back from the IL stint he's just about to take. He's got put on the IL today, which is a bummer. But I would look forward to him coming back because he was also having a redemption story. But yeah, they deserve to hear their names on our podcast. Luis Rengifo, Taylor Ward, Zach Neto, Logan O'Hoppe, they pull their weight, and this team does have it in them. Oh, and Nolan Shanuel, I appreciate you too. I think you'll be a fine long-term first baseman coming up with this team, and it's exciting to think one day they'll put it all together. But damn, that day is so far off. Well, so far off. So, look forward to watching the process. Hopefully it's sometime click, but it's going to be a long time before they get a nuclei back to lead them. Taylor Ward's the closest they've got, and I have a ton of respect for Taylor Ward. Stay healthy, my guy, if you can.
Yeah.
Because the glass players that have emerged recently are getting more and more broken. More and more broken. We'll talk about
Mike Trout is he a Minnesota Twin? Is that what it is, Warren?
Oh, man. The Minnesota Twins are a long way from being discussed in today's show, so it stinks because the Buxton story broke. I'm sure you all know he'll be undergoing some sort of injury for some
Yeah.
time in his knee and rehabbing it, and it's a bummer, man. But we knew it was going to happen. Anyway, again, let's not get into Minnesota far too soon. It's your turn, Dan. Who's the mucky muck? Who's the mucky muck you want to toss to and fro next?
Man, for me, it's not just the record, it's about the teams that you're playing against and the trends, right? And for me right now, my sinker's got to be the Houston Astros. I'm sure you're happy about it, Warren. But
Whoa.
things are bad and getting worse for this Astros team. They're at 10-20, went 4-6 over this last week and a half, and their run differential is down to negative 22. And this is the big news, Warren. I'm sure you heard Jose Abreu was sent
Hmm.
down to find
Yeah.
his swing, and not to AAA, Warren, not to AA, not to high A, rookie ball. They sent him to
What?
rookie ball, Warren, to find his swing again. And I mean, at this point, despite the quality bats that are still part of this Astros roster, their starting pitching especially has been so horrendous outside
Uh-huh.
of Renel Blanco.
Uh-huh.
They cannot get any consistency out of anybody else. Christian Javier is still dealing with neck discomfort, and he's not ready to come back and help just yet.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, Warren, I know people were saying don't panic, it's a long season, but we're 30 games in, and at this point, the Astros would have to go 85-47 the rest of the way. They'd have to win 2/3 of their games
Ooh.
going through the rest of the season. And I just to make the playoffs, Warren, not even to win this division because they probably can't. I don't see that happening. Of course, it's possible and they can go off. But even this upcoming week, 3 games against Seattle and then 3 in New York against the Yankees. This team did manage 4 wins in the last week and a half, but it was in Mexico against a weak Colorado team where they were both
Yeah.
slugging home runs left and right. I
Hey,
mean,
real quick, I have to apologize to Mexico. We gave them a terrible Major League Baseball matchup. How
oh, they
dare
love the home
us?
runs, dude. They love it, right?
Yeah, but we still could have done far better. How dare we?
Yeah, you're right.
God,
It's a shame.
it's a
Mexico City
shame.
series will have another opportunity, hopefully, for some more quality.
God, I'm just so let down. Korea gets Shohei. Korea got Shohei! How dare they? All right, I could go on and on. But yeah, here's why I'm shocked you put Houston as a sinker even right now. Because right now, at this minute, we are absorbing the fact, and I'm warning the entire Major League Baseball scene. This is it. They just got a series against Cleveland. They just got them. And that is a big, big, big red flag for those who are expecting to see the Houston Astros continue to be mediocre. I think this next series against the Seattle Mariners is extremely pivotal for both teams. And if Seattle wants to avoid Houston being a problem, they shut them down. They need to shut them down in this upcoming series. I wish no fortune on the Astros. That's what I do. I respect some of their players individually, like Kyle Tucker, who is still the offensive stalwart for this team, right? Though Jose Altuve may go down in history as one of the best second basemen ever. We get that. Respect. They're playing great. The offense is fine in Houston. It's not that's the issue. It is the pitching. They are struggling to find consistency there, and they can't get the closing situation figured out. They're playing uninspired ball from the mound, but it's not going to potentially continue much longer unless Seattle shuts them down in the next series. I can't overstate the importance, Dan. I'm sorry to ramble, but I will never disrespect these Houston Astros until they're out of it. I hear you over there with your, they have to win 3/4 of their games now in order to make the playoffs. Well, guess what? They're the Houston Astros and they just might do it. Okay, Dan?
Okay.
So, kick more dirt. I want more dirt. Oh, and then they get the Yankees after us. So hopefully the Yankees would knock them out if we don't suffocate them with our rear naked choke style of baseball. Okay. Dan, it's my turn. Next team. I'm excited. I cannot wait to admit that the Pirates are doing it again, Dan. They are sinking back down to the bottom of whatever
abandoned
body of...
ship.
Yes! Abandoned ship. Another season is lost. Oh, woe is me. You mean our
Not already.
our exciting young prospect, O'Neal Cruz, excuse me, is not playing well and is actually providing negative WAR to our team? Oh no. You mean our closer, Bednar, who's been an all-star the last 2 years, is blowing chunks? Oh, no. Yeah, man. It stinks to be a Pirate yet again because yet another year you're letting all the momentum go. And it may not be too late. You really could potentially take these next couple of series. You've got 3 against Colorado. You've got 3 against the Angels. Surely these are teams that you can use to cook yourself up for those Chicago Cubs who will welcome you at home at some point after those next 2 series. Like, you gotta hope you can do this, but it's not looking good. You were swept by the Red Sox, right? You split a series with the Brewers. Phew. Man, that looked like it was going to be something you could build momentum off. But no, a loss to San Francisco and then getting swept at the hands of the Athletics. What is going on, guy? What's going on? Dan, you know I feel this so deeply. I believed, and I know we were confident for at least 1 week this might stick. Darn it, Pirates. Darn it.
It's the Pirates, man. We should have saw it coming, right? We let the hope and the good story just take over. And yeah, it's all kind of coming crashing down. The rookies are making defensive mistakes that they weren't making at the start of the year, which is bound to happen. It's just happening kind of all at the same time and costing them opportunities to stay in games late. And then on top of that, yeah, the offense has really been dreadful across the board recently. Andrew McCutcheon in particular, he's actually doing a little bit better since being moved back into the leadoff spot, but overall slashing 167, 333 OPS through 11 games. Yeah. Henry Davis was off to a great start, and he is hitting 125 over these last 2 weeks, not doing anything. I mean, Connor Joe has actually gotten better. He's been the one kind of batter who has continued to improve, and everyone else is pretty much regressed. Like Brian Reynolds isn't doing terrible, but compared to his hot start, not nearly hitting those numbers. And you mentioned O'Neal Cruz, Warren. It's disappointing, and I'm sure this is probably going to swing in the other direction. Like, we think they're sinking, Warren, but I don't know. That ship is just diving deep into that wave, and they might come rebounding back, as you mentioned, in these next couple of series. Certainly, if they don't do well, maybe we'll have to start setting off some alarm bells because, man, the Pirates look like a different team almost when they make these kind of unfortunate mistakes and their bullpen throws away the few good starts that they are managing to get.
Yeah, they've got some good pitching prospects that could come in and really contribute to right the ship. Of course, Paul Skeens, we're waiting. Come on in, man. This is a great time. Add some stability because pitching and the number of pitchers who you've had to put out there, I think makes an impact to the quality of your baseball start. And I feel like adding some stability to your rotation is key right now. Get Skeens in here. Hurry up. He's good. We know he's good. Quit hyping. Stop hyping. It's almost like you're like, here, look at Skeens in the minor leagues for as long as you can. He might be available at the deadline. Stop it. Don't you dare. How dare you? Give the Pirates some hope. Let's go. Please. So yeah, this upcoming homestand may go on to define the whole rest of the Pirates season. And if they can heat up against Colorado and those troutless Angels, they may be ready to take on the Cubs by the claws, my friend. Is that fair? Like, I went with claws. Is that the iconic part of a Cubs weapon?
No.
Kit,
but
no.
I mean, Yogi Bear is what I would have gone with, but
Okay, I haven't watched Yogi Bear.
hey,
In
Yogi.
Wow, here's a picnic basket of being terrible at baseball. Enjoy. Yum 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 yum. That was more like Cookie Monster, but I'm not.
It was, but that works.
Yeah, I'm here. We're here to have some fun, guys. Your turn, Dan. Isn't it? Isn't it your turn?
Yeah, I'm
Who's your
gonna round this
final?
out,
Yeah, who's your
dude.
final sinker? The 25th worst team in baseball right now,
Yeah,
theoretically.
sure is, statistically and in every other way that matters. Yeah, for me, it's again going off of recent trends and expectations. I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling that my last sinker this week is going to have to be the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they didn't have a horrible week. They went 4-6. They're still
Mm-hmm.
14-18, so well below 500, plus 18 run differential, and that isn't the worst thing, Warren, but what's kind of disturbing about that is they're still behind the Giants in their division with a negative run differential and the Padres who are
Mm-hmm.
at 0. So despite them managing a positive run differential, they're not managing to win games. And I wanted to dig in a little bit more and kind of see like what's going on with Arizona because I don't think they're a bad team. I just think that they're underperforming to a kind of odd rate. And the trend that I'm seeing, Warren, is they're struggling against teams over 500. They're 4 and
Mm-hmm.
10 so far. And with the Dodgers in town and their next series after that being the San Diego Padres, who they've already struggled against,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of concerning that just playing games in their division and the off games outside of it that they're going to be against these stronger teams. They haven't performed super well in those situations.
Mm-hmm.
And the pitching has been pretty respectable. Scott McGough has kind of struggled in a couple of his appearances, but everybody else has been great. Hasn't allowed more than 2 runs. Gallen had one outing with 3, but he settled down really well compared from where he started. But over
Mm-hmm.
that time, this past 2 weeks, just 13 runs have come in from the offense. And
Mm-hmm.
so you start to get the idea, like outside of Christian Walker and Ketel Marte, who have still been doing really well, like nobody is popping off at a consistent enough rate to bring in runners in scoring position. And that's kind of what you need to do to be a good competitive team, especially in this division. I'm sure that's something that could change for Arizona, but for me right now, they're not passing the eye test. And these struggles, I can just see them compounding with some of these matchups they have coming up. So they're going to be a sinker.
Yeah, they could be a sinker, especially against expectations. I think we can respect that there's just not a consistency to this team that we expected to see in their offense, especially. Some recent bright spots like Blaze Alexander coming out of nowhere. Watching some baseball games with him in them, and I'm thinking, man, they've got a lot of talent that could and still and probably will, Dan, if I'm being frank, put it all together at some point, or at least more together than where it's at. I do think it happens, but there's a concerning trend, and I think it's all around right now Corbin Carroll's sophomore slump. And I think if he can bounce back offensively, the rest of the team will start to kind of be along with him. There just needs to be some energy. And when there's a dark cloud over perceived star, as I can relate to with the way I think Julio Rodriguez is performing, like I can kind of see that once the stars pop off, both offenses might pop off. You see how I can make everything about Seattle? I'm so good at this, guys. Very talented at that. Anyway, very humble too. The Arizona Diamondbacks are in a bit of a low point, and I was surprised, so surprised that they were among the teams that the Mariners were able to take 2 of 3 from. And they have struggled against the Padres, and it is an uphill climb against them on paper right at the moment, even though the Padres are not lighting the world on fire either. And then, Cincinnati's a spark plug wild card team against anybody. I put them along the lines of the Tigers in terms of that over in the American League for those who are like, oh, I only pay attention to half the teams, bro. Well, there's your comparison. Enjoy. At least as far as what they can do to the playoff scene. Yeah, I'm talking about the Reds. A little too early, too. Darn it. Stay focused. Anyway, guys, I love Arizona. It was tough watching them drop 2 to my team, only because I root for them to get some momentum back, and it may be a bit before they do. But they have to turn around soon, don't they, Dan? So now is the fun part. We've covered all of our sinkers, okay? These are the ones that Dan and I were clear were going to be ordered up near the bottom before we began this recording. Now it's all basically pulled from the tops of our heads based on the results we have in front of us. And, we have very simple means of getting everything organized here, guys. Let's start plucking and trucking through some of the base hits that are a little bit, you know, towards the middle of the league, a little less polarizing this week, Dan. So on this list is the Colorado Rockies, and I might as well get them out of the way. This team is also, as always, among the basement, and that's just statistically true no matter what week you look at it. So we might as well just focus on it and toss them aside. Colorado actually also got some bad injury news recently. They're going to lose Nolan Jones, unfortunately, to the IL for a little while, and he's maybe one of the only reasons to be excited to watch Rockies baseball. If I have my names correct, don't tell me I got him confused with that Nolan Gorman from St. Louis, Dan. Right? I'm good. Nolan Jones.
You're good. Don't
Thank
worry. We'll keep track of all the St. Louis players you shit on as we go through.
I hope we're over 5 minutes into our content. I think we're good. Okay,
Yeah.
good. So we got a good wholesome curse there. Thank you, Dan. They went 3-8 this week, did the Colorado Rockies. They dropped 2 of 3 to the Mariners. They did get that one win that I think they deserved. Why did the Mariners offense die to the point where they let it go into extra innings? Please, Rockies, have one. But then the Rockies went on to split 4 with the Padres, which is actually something that the Padres should be ashamed of, really. They lost both games to the Astros in the Mexico City series in the lamest matchup we could have possibly given an international audience. I'm so sorry, Mexico. And then they got swept by the Marlins to kick off May. The only thing that doesn't let this read as catastrophic is that this level of failure is entirely expected out of the Rockies. Ugh. They're just a terrible team, Dan. And, I'm sorry to Ryan McMahon, who's having a good year so far. I'm sorry that Charlie Blackmon's flashes of positivity have been limited to this specific franchise. Not that I'm really all that obsessed with his mediocre play. It hasn't been great out there either. But Brendan Doyle, maybe, is a positive light. I think you've noticed, too, that he's done a great job out in center field for those Rockies. And they could be looking at him as a long-term solution there if he's willing to relegate his entire career to this kind of a abysmal franchise. But I wouldn't. Would you, Dan?
You got to hope for something, right? And that starts with keeping good players like that. And he's definitely someone to start on. But I wanted to point out, Warren, that Brendan Doyle is actually leading the league in BABIP, our old stat we talked about last week. And number 2 in the league
Ooh.
is his teammate Ryan McMahon, curiously
Yep.
enough. So luck is on these guys' sides. And hey, Ezekiel Tovar is at number 8 too with a 387. So with Doyle and McMahon and well into the 400s at 435 and 432 respectively, this team is definitely benefiting from that. We saw that with some hard hit balls in that Mexico City series. You mentioned against the Mariners, but really outside of that, I think the big news has been that Colorado is setting an ongoing record for trailing in consecutive games at some point in the game. And the record was at 29. The most brutal one was just a couple of days ago, Warren. They were able to score 5 runs on Miami in the top of the first inning, took a 5-0 lead all the way into the bottom of the ninth, and then gave up 5 runs, sent it into extras, and then Miami walked off in the 10th. Absolutely brutal. So the streak continued, and in fact, it is still currently going. It is at 31 consecutive games where the Rockies have trailed for at some point. But the one little bit of good news that I will give them is they were able to deliver some burgers in Miami. Hey, right there with Tampa
Hey.
Bay. So no
Nom, nom, nom,
credit to
nom,
the
nom, nom.
Marlins goes to that. It always goes to the away team. So thank you, Colorado, for providing more burgers than Jake has in Miami.
Yum, 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 yum.
What is
Yes.
the Cookie Monster again?
Delicious. No. The burger beast. We don't own the rights to Cookie Monster. We don't want to owe them money.
What, the
Okay?
Hamburglar?
All right, sir. Yeah, we'll just move on. Who's your next pick for basement amongst the league, Dan? I some pretty interesting candidates.
Well, yeah, you got Colorado out of the way, so I think we're gonna have to say the Chicago White Sox are
Oh,
next.
yeah,
And hey,
yeah.
23 is a pretty good ranking for the White Sox team. And you know what? I think it's kind of fair because they did win 3 games in the last week
Yeah,
and a half. They doubled their win total. Hey, that's something, right?
yeah.
And we'll take it. And a big shout out has to go to Eric Feedy, Warren, unless you have a better way to pronounce that, going 8.1 innings against Tampa to basically secure their 4-2 win, which is exactly the kind of help that they need on the pitching side of things because the offense continues to be the worst in the American League and is right there with the Cardinals and the Pirates for the worst in the entire league. And Tommy Pham is now with the White Sox, but it's going to take him a little bit of time, like we've seen with all these other late signings. Warren, that's another good little storyline we could probably talk about. All these guys that
Sure.
are struggling, pitchers and hitters, to get up to speed. So might be
Mm-hmm.
until Tommy Pham kind of warms up before we see anybody start sparking things because not a lot of other exciting aspects to this White Sox team to me.
Well, sure. I think we all knew that there's no reason to be. I mean, Eric Fetty, perhaps, and Garrett Crochet have been really exciting elements to a pitching game that really doesn't deserve to have any. I watched Chris Flexen, formerly a Mariner, get a Major League Baseball win in 2024 with this team, and it
Wow.
disappointed a certain core of me. No, I'm kidding. I was happy for the guy that he would get a Major League Baseball win at all after the way he pitched for us in Seattle. But I digress. Make anything about Seattle. I'm so good at it. Oh, man. Anyway, I say it too much. The batting is amongst the worst in baseball, and the pitching is, apart from those two highlights, again, just tragic. And so every single matchup moving forward gets to be the one where the opponent is favored, generally. Except for, I suppose, the Tampa Bay Rays, which, lo and behold, are on their horizon again. They get ready to face the White Sox after the White Sox wrap with the St. Louis Cardinals, which should be fun. I hope Lance Lynn is somewhere involved in that series. I mean, I haven't looked at the pitching matchups, but in my mind, I want to see it. But after Tampa Bay, they have to face Cleveland, who, yes, coming off the Houston Astros series loss and with some question marks we'll have to discuss later on in the show because they're definitely not this low, are those Guardians. Well, they could be vulnerable for some Chicago White Sox momentum. Maybe they'll have 8 wins by the next time we talk, Dan. Maybe. Not likely.
I'd be impressed.
All right, so I'm going to have to go with a team that I just think had an incredibly bad week or a bad series of days since we talked, Dan. That's the last time I'm using that disclaimer. So if y'all are listening to this and you're like, boy, gosh, this all sounds kind of longer than a week, guys. Well, then you should have heard me say this over and over again, okay? Since the last time we talked, Dan, the Blue Jays have stunk. They've just flat out stunk. And they've had some of the lineup show flashes of the potential they wish to have, and it's the ones that they paid for, at least, like Justin Turner's been great for them, it would seem. And you have to be impressed by the other hired gun that they picked up in the off season. I have the list, but I'm losing my place, guys, in my notes. Classic Warren. Just classic. But
Classic.
Toronto Blue Jays at least got to benefit from the stability of some of their starting rotation. That I can discuss. Chris Bassett's been really disappointing after all with 5.45 ERA. And Kevin Gossman and his 4.50 ERA also really hasn't been the start you looked for. At least Yusei Kikuchi has been pitching better than I've ever seen him in recent memory. But so is Jose Barrios. Team's not been bad, man, recently when they are on the mound. But offensively, half the team has been really disappointing. The team that you wanted to be good for you this year, Bichette, is having a negative impact on your offense right at the moment. Vlad Guerrero's not pulling the weight you hoped he would. We talk about this every week, Dan. This core needed to get going together, and it's not happening. How much longer before? I mean, this is it. This is the year, right? We got to see them get going soon. This is a dangerous spot for them to be in. They have 3 against the Washington Nationals next, and then the Phillies. And both series are on the road, so things are not getting easier for the Toronto Blue Jays, but they have to play like they are, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. And, tough division. Like we've said a couple times here, we have a lot more teams outperforming where we thought they would be. And the Blue Jays are underperforming, and it's a broken record, isn't it, Warren? How many times have we talked about this, not just this year, but in years past? The hitters for the Blue Jays are 22nd in the league right now, 670 OPS, 24th in the league with a 225 batting average. So not good, and they have a whiff rate of 22.5%, which is actually good for 5th best in the league. So the strikeouts aren't exactly robbing them of everything. It's like you mentioned, that top 3, Springer, Vladdy, Bo, all struggling. They've managed to get their averages above 200, but that's about the best you can say. They're still being outperformed by Turner and Varsho behind them. And injuries are hitting the bullpen pretty hard. And Yariel Rodriguez and Bowden Francis being out for the starters means they're actually really hoping Alex Manoah comes back soon in Toronto because they need the help. Because you mentioned a lot of those great starting pitchers, they do not want to put extra pressure on them. And these injuries are starting to push them up against it. And yeah, like I mentioned, the whiff rate, you kind of hope that that's signs of them making the right decisions. There has been some good contact. So maybe there's some breakouts yet to come. And hopefully against a couple of National League teams, maybe they can break out. And this might be a good week for them to rebound, get about 500 and help out that run differential a little bit. Could be an opportunity for them to turn around. But yeah, Warren, I just get that broken record vibe in the back of my head, just repeating all the same things again and again and again with this Toronto team.
You hate to see it. Shout out to Isaiah Kiner Falefa, the individual with the most complicated name that, of course, I forgot it. Sorry, guys. I needed a piece of paper. Don't hate me for it. Oh, and it is Dalton Varsho, guys. It's his show. Dalton Varsho's show
For
in
sure.
Toronto. Thank you, Dan. I love it. What a good pop. It was all worth it. Hey, it's your turn, buddy. There's a 21st worst team in the league waiting for you to spell them out. Can you even spell the next city's name? I don't think I could if put under the gun.
Nope. All I know is it's in Ohio because it's the Cincinnati Reds. And, still in the back half of the league, but getting more towards the middle. We know the upside that the Reds have. They had a 4-6 week. They're
Mm-hmm.
a game over 500 with a plus 18 run differential and kind of shows them trending right on the edge. Still struggling against some of those above 500 teams that, of course, they've been playing for a while and they have a few coming up. But the news is really to take away from the Cincinnati Reds team is Ellie De La Cruz is a player to watch for all of the reasons, Warren. He's a marvel defensively at
Mm-hmm.
over 7 feet with his vertical leap over 8. He is given the green light to swipe whatever bags he wants. Doesn't matter, Warren. 1 out, 2 outs, first to
Nice.
second to third, swipe home. He's up to 17 bags and counting. He's got a 4 steal margin over his next closest competitor, Bryce Terang. He's on pace for 81 or more this season, and it's just fun to watch. The same kind of thing we got from the Reds last year. I was happy to see them still pushing that run game. We talked about the injuries and some of the lack of power in their lineup, and it's exciting to see them make up for that with opportunities on the base paths. A couple other things really quick. Frankie Montas hit the IL, which is pretty unfortunate. Nick
Yeah.
Martinez is somebody that's going to be coming back here pretty soon. And lefty Sam Mole is coming off the IL to debut this year. So that should help out the bullpen a little bit. And yeah, Reds are kind of in the middle there. And this should be a good test for them this next coming week. Curious to see how they'll respond.
Yeah, I think Baltimore is going to be a very interesting test of how, flexible these Reds really are. And if they can kind of ambush Baltimore, which has shown to struggle sometimes in the early innings, honestly, giving up runs, but they won't be facing Corbin Burns. So maybe that's kind of a dead stat. Anyway, Baltimore could be a really good challenge to anybody, and we know that. They're a great, great team right now. So Cincinnati will really learn a lot about what they can do from them. And then Arizona after that. So a good battle between teams that, are in the bubble. We know they're in the bubble. They're somewhere in that, boy, they could be contenders in a couple of months here. But they also could not be. But yeah, you can't deny Ellie De La Cruz's entertainment value and Spencer Steer with them. Shout out to him, man. The Scottie Pippen to Ellie De La Cruz's Michael Jordan for this squad. It's so fun to watch those two play together. Cincinnati's not dead in the water. They're a long way from it. Weather this storm. That's an interesting one to watch. There's still one to watch. Okay, Dan, I suppose it's my turn to shout out a team. And what bothers me about this scenario is that the integrity of what we are here to talk about in the method that we're here to talk about leaves me with literally just one team left for me to highlight right at the moment. Yeah, the top 20th team in the league, I suppose, the way to put it so it hurts less, is the New York Mets. Because they went 4-7 this week. They didn't light the world on fire. They did just come off a really cool series win over the Cubs. I got to give you credit. And I think the Cubs are in trouble because I think their situation in pitching is also unsustainable. We'll get to them soon. We're on the Mets. I know. But the Mets got that really cool series win. There's enough momentum here where I didn't want to have to talk to them in the terms that points out a losing record this week, but it's what happened. How do you feel about your team after this week? Am I being crude and cruel to them?
There's a couple close matchups against the Giants and the Cubs that we probably should have come away with wins in and did not, but that's, how it goes. We also walked away with a couple of really close wins. I know we got heartbreakers over the Cubs and the Cardinals, just as we lost a couple ourselves. So, a couple good things to take away from a tough week is that Lindor is kind of breaking out of his slump, and he had four RBIs off the bench on Thursday, and including a 2 RBI walk-off double over the Cubs, which is pretty exciting. And this is the night after leaving the game with flu-like symptoms. So that's been really promising. And JD Martinez has had 6 hits since his debut 6 games ago. So that's been great. But kind of just as the Mets go with Lindor coming out of his slump, Pete Alonso is kind of starting to go into it.
Yeah.
So that's been unfortunate. And then while the starting pitching has been great from our trio of newly acquired starters in Quintana, Manaya, and Severino, the rest of the pitching, especially in the bullpen side of things, has been just coming back down to earth a little bit after being one of the top 3 teams in the National League for quite a while. So seeing them come back down to earth is not overall surprising. Also, obviously, Francisco Alvarez hit the IL after rupturing a ligament in his left thumb. He's going to be out for at least another 5-6 weeks. I think that will go longer because being a catcher, you need that catching hand to be pretty resilient and ready to go. So he was one of the hottest bats in the lineup, and him being out is contributing to a little bit of that I wouldn't call it a slump, but depression that we're going through right now. So I do think that this is something we'll rebound from. We've seen streaky bats, and
Mm-hmm.
with a couple of the consistent ones being like Tyrone Taylor should get some
Yeah.
credit for
Yeah.
being really good in this lineup, and Starling Marte has
Mm-hmm.
excelled in the DH role, made some great grabs in the outfield, and even Marte did miss a couple games, got put on the bereavement list, and they called up Mark Vientos, who did great in the 3 games that he appeared in, including getting a walk-off home run before immediately being sent back down to AAA. So I see a lot of bright spots with the Mets. I'm seeing a lot of good close baseball, and I'm pretty confident in the schedule coming up and pretty happy with how they've performed so far.
Dan, tell us any return news for Kodai Senga? I want to see a forkball.
Yeah, he's so rehab. He's still working on it. He had a few bullpen sessions already against some Mets rookies and lower levels of the system. The earliest he can return is at the end of May, 27th of May, and they're working for him to be ready to come back and join the roster at that point. So we're still probably about 3 weeks away from that. So need to hold things down for a little bit while, but cannot wait for Senga to get back. Just because he's a pleasure to watch, and he kind of changes the dynamic of the whole rotation when he's in there.
We've got a couple of fun duels coming up for these New York Mets, by the way. First, it's going to be the Tampa Bay Rays hosting them, and that could be an opportunity for the Mets to speed past a team that looks to be scuffling themselves on the offensive end. It could be a low scoring series unless some guys start to pop off, and we need to look at that on both sides. Anyway, after that, it's the St. Louis Cardinals who will host the New York Mets, and that's another team that, even though they're, floating around 500, is also the bottom of their division, so they're the least reliable to maybe come out as a challenger to the Mets. So hopefully they sharpen their swords and get ready for a tougher segment of their schedule. And we talk about them more on a rising tone next week. Your turn, Dan. It's another team to break down at number 19, breaking into the middle third of our collection of squads. Hope you're enjoying the show, everybody. I love this. I think we're having a good pace.
Yeah, I'm with it, and I'm loving the little surprises. I think you're going to be surprised here, Warren. I'm going to go with this team that you love, the St. Louis Cardinals, your favorite team in
Ah,
red. Yeah, the
boo!
St. Louis Cardinals. They had a 5-5 week, 3 games under 500 to the tune of a negative 30 run differential. And that kind of tells the tale for this team. They've struggled on both sides of the ball, but had watched them play against the Mets, and gotta say, Sonny Gray still performing, Warren, just like he
Oh yeah.
has. It's been impressive to watch, and I gotta shout out credit Lance Lynn, 2.64 ERA, 29 Ks. I know you had your doubts, Warren, but he's pulled it together and been pretty impressive so far, don't you think?
I'm not going to do this, but I have to for the integrity of the show. Lance Lynn has held his own for the rotation. And you know what? Kyle Gibson sort of kind of has as well, but to a lesser extent, okay? To a
Sure.
lesser extent. But it's instead Mats and Mikolas having helped this rotation as older birds beginning to break down. They're starting to break down. They're the ones struggling. But if you want me to root for the Cardinals, sir, it's the fact that Newt Barr has returned. And I have a player to enjoy watching. And I will again if when Tyler Edmond comes back. I love Edmond. I think he's great too. But anyway, I would root for Newt Barr, even though he's not getting off to the best start as a recent returnee. You said that yourself. The late returnees to Major League action have really struggled so far.
Right.
Uh, and it's almost better to call up younger guys, right, who just came off the best fine tuning of their young careers. We've seen that a little bit in some other lineups around the league, but I'm trying to resist the urge to make everything about the Mariners for a change. Anyway, yeah, Arenado and Goldschmidt, they get some timely hits, but they're largely not the resurging stars we need them to be and want them
Right.
to be in order for this, team to rise up. I mean, really, their only dynamic statistic, if you want to talk about it, is their saves. They're number 2 in the league, and you think that to Ryan Helsley, who has 10. He's pitched 16 innings for this team and been very effective in each one. And Andrew Kittredge is a stalwart for the relieving squad. I also want to shout out who has a 0.75, guys, excuse me, a 0.75 ERA over 12 innings pitched, and that's nothing to take away from a team that's, kind of floundering to prove that they that they are among contenders once again, when you think.
Yeah, and there are a couple bright spots here and there, but like you mentioned, I actually get a lot of vibes from the Blue Jays with the Cardinals. I feel like this is our NL representative of the Blue Jays because we have that classic case with Arenado and Goldie, and I'll even throw Contreras and Gorman in there recently who have really struggled. I mean, this team is 27th right now in the league in batting average at 219 and next to last in home runs with just 13. Jordan Walker, who was supposed to be a mainstay, has been sent down, demoted for the second consecutive year. He was hitting just 155 through his first 20 games, and a strikeout rate was just going straight up. So, yeah, expectations are heavy on this team's head, and maybe some more of these guys just needs a day off for a couple days to take some time and readjust themselves because a couple easy series coming up should be easy enough for them to rebound. But I don't think the Cardinals have any easy games up ahead with the way they've been playing lately.
Yeah, I am inclined to agree. However, I have one more pill to swallow about this team because of all the players to be leading the squad in offensive input and positive vibes, I didn't think it'd be Mason Wynn that I'd have to recognize at this point in the season as the bright spot in the roster. So, Mason, I'm sorry I was such a jerk about you. I had the least faith in you with this lineup, and you are proving me absolutely wrong. My turn, and this is a tough call. I really struggled to pick a team to go into the 18th spot because, I realize there's a lot of decent teams in Major League Baseball right at the moment. It's just who's trending upward and downward. And one team I want to acknowledge trending downward more than upward at this moment in my mind is San Francisco and these Giants, who have to be a tad disappointed in their investments because things are not working out as fluidly as they hoped. Um, they're definitely one of the more interesting collections of pitchers. When you look at their stats and when I try to break them down, uh, the starters aren't the complete issue. The middle bullpen actually seems to be more at fault for their failures. Overall, they're 24th in ERA, and that's not Jordan Hicks's fault. That much we do know. He's been pitching lights out to a 159 ERA in 34 innings pitched. That's good for fifth in the entire league, by the way, folks. So Jordan Hicks is actually a bright spot. But otherwise, they're 26th in saves, they're 23rd in earned runs, they're 29th in strikeouts, they're 21st in whip, which we haven't broken down yet, but that's walks and hits per innings pitched. It's a good statistic to kind of generalize how effective a guy is at throwing shutdown innings. 26th in hit by pitch, guys. Like this is just not winning baseball from the mound, which, they did get to swoop in and make that last second move to bolster their rotation, but has it really paid off? I mean, it just seems like the Giants aren't good enough. Batting wise, it's been Patrick Bailey who's been the biggest factor, though Matt Chapman has chipped in .7 WAR so far. But Lamonte Wade, Lamonte Wade Jr. and Michael Conforto and Tyro Estrada are really the only brighter spots amongst the lineup, but they're not doing this consistently. Yeah, the Giants just still lack the punch to me. They lack the consistency, and they don't look like a playoff team yet. Can they grow into one, Dan? You did pick them to become one. Talk to me.
Yeah, hey, 2 games under 500 with a negative 23 run differential. I think it's kind of impressive.
Hmm.
They're winning games, and especially in some of those games against the Mets where they're getting outplayed. So I give them credit for that. And you mentioned some of the bads, but it's important, I think, to point out that Mike Yastrzemski, after an absolutely horrendous start to the year, has rebounded recently just of late. In his
Hmm.
last 11 games, he's managed 11 hits, 3 home runs, 10 RBIs over that period, over 1,000 OPS over that period. So starting to heat up. It's exactly what they needed. And then, yeah, Blake Snell, sad to see it, like we're mentioning, with all these guys who had late
Hmm.
starts to the season and didn't have a chance to ramp up. I really think they need to give a lot of these guys an extra day of rest. And I'm sure a lot of those guys are, especially Blake Snell, don't want that. But I think they need it because now they got Blake Snell on the shelf. Hopefully, it's not anything serious. The left adductor strain right now, so it's something he can nurse. But yeah, the Giants need a little bit more help from the rest of their pitching staff. It's been better recently than what it was opening the season, but not good enough. And staying in those close games has been impressive for them, but it's not going to be something they consistently do within their own division. I mean, the Padres and the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks are no slouches. So,
Hmm.
not optimistic for the Giants, but I still think that they're good enough to stay on that bubble. And it's going to be the teams around them that are going to tell the story of where they end up at this point.
Yeah, I agree. The painting of this division will take the entire season, and four of those teams are likely to be bouncing around trying to bust into the playoff scene from the West. So it's a very exciting division. Too early to count anybody out. Too true. But the Giants are not trending positively. They're going to want to, well, take advantage of at least a game, try to force a split against the Phillies. It's hard to expect them to win 4 games, 3 games against the Philadelphia Phillies with the way they've been playing. And, if they fail, no matter how hard they do, these Giants, at least they'll have Colorado to visit afterwards. So hopefully they'll have Band Aid to enjoy out in Denver. Yeah, good choice. Good choice in my mind to put San Francisco here, if I do say so myself. But your turn, Dan. We have the 17th team to review next.
Yeah, moving into that middle area. So I feel like this is probably a good spot for the Washington Nationals, who had a
Yeah.
pretty good week, but they're still right there at 500. And lot of holes on this team. Pitching, I think, has been the most apparent thing because a lot of rookies, obviously, a pretty young team getting opportunities and actually performing pretty admirably. But the pitching has been a problem. Fourth worst starting ERA in the league of a 4.52 over these last couple of weeks. Their offense has several bright spots, but
Mm,
too many guys who are struggling to even get to 200. Joey Gallo has done nothing for them recently, coming off the bench or in games where he's been able to start. And you have guys
mm,
who are just straight up going hitless, like Rosario and Nunez
mm,
lately. And
mm.
it's a
Hey,
recipe.
stop it! Stop it right now! You say his name. You say the name of the greatest up and coming baseball player in the American League. You know him well. He has 2 letters that are consonants that make up his first name and a name that starts with A for his last. Say his name.
Yes, it's CJ Abrams. Absolutely. In
Oh,
the National League.
baby. Yeah,
Yes,
I said American League. I'm sorry. I should have said National League. I apologize, guys. A little
CJ
mental flub.
Abrams.
But I proved my point. This man demands attention.
You're right. And you know what, Warren, that you bring up a great point because to be honest, with the surrounding cast on the Nationals, I think CJ Abrams is going to be an all-star this year.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty certain to say at this point. He looks like a
When
well-rounded ball player, and he's going to get tons of playing time on this team. And already 4 stolen bases on the year. I'm happy to see him moving on the paths too.
you ready for the Seattle Mariners connection, man?
Oh
When your
boy.
number 2 is Jesse Winker, bro. Yes, you're gonna be the all-star of this lineup. Are you kidding me?
Yup.
Jeez, but yes, stealing some bases, doing it all, looking great defensively. I'm not trying to steal your thunder. This was the right place to put the Nationals. I agree with you, Dan. They're mediocre, but there's a lot to root for, and they've really adopted the Cincinnati Reds meta of running the bases. And they join those Reds as being opponents to the Baltimore Orioles this upcoming week. I think it'll be an interesting gauntlet for Baltimore to run. I get ahead of myself again. But anyway, the stolen bases meta really is effective to at least scrap out wins in an entertaining fashion, because you got to at least admit that when you scroll past a Nationals game, it's at least entertaining to watch. They're fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh well.
Yeah, you're right, Warren. There are some fun bright spots. You mentioned the defense going to Abrams has been great, but I've noticed the defense around the rest of the field has been pretty rough. So when you say
Ugh.
fun to watch, to me, it's fun to watch the ball fly around the infield.
Oh yeah, very fun. Very fun at least to watch these guys do their best. I
Yeah,
agree. But a couple years from now, man, these Nationals will be playing baseball that matters again, and
yeah,
CJ Abrams will hopefully be at their core. That's all I have to say on that. Good luck to them getting some momentum back. Honestly, an interesting series coming up with Texas. They only play two. I hate those little two gamers, to be honest
yeah.
with you. I really do. They don't tell you a whole lot. But
Mhm.
the Rangers are in a bit of a vulnerable place, so this could honestly go either way or any way. And then you look at Toronto, who will follow, and that's another team that honestly the Nationals could beat. So maybe they rev up enough, momentum to give Baltimore an issue here in the next week or so. So anything can happen. The Nationals are an interesting team, though, a fun one. All right, I think we've got time for one more. Is that true, Dan? Just one more before we might consider a different direction. But what I want to share with y'all is my next pick, team number 16. I would like to go with my selection, San Diego Padres. The other San.
Uh,
They yeah, I'm sure you probably felt this coming up. If not now, then
yeah.
when? The Padres are fringe contenders at the moment and didn't have as good a week as some of the more surprising names we haven't talked about yet. I see you over there. You're like, hey guys, you're forgetting this one really poopy team who never has anything good going from. They had a good week. Shut up. I'll talk about them later. Right now is
No,
the
the
Padres
Mariners are
time.
next. Just be patient.
Stop! How dare you crossing my references of vagueness? Let's see, guys. The Padres they look like a middling team right now. The hot offensive start just really hasn't translated enough to get the wins that they need. They had a series loss to the Blue Jays, right? That kind of tells you what you need to hear. That featured some pretty exciting baseball. I mean, it was some good back and forth in some of those games, but it kind of left the Padres vulnerable, and they ended up splitting 4 games with the Rockies, which is just not ideal for them right at the moment. They were then swept by a clearly superior Phillies team, and at least at this moment anyway, before bouncing back to score a series win over Cincinnati. Now, is that enough momentum to ride them past Arizona and onwards to a showdown with the Cubs? I don't really know if they're in the best position for that matchup, even if the Cubs are starting to break down at the mound. More on them later, I suppose. But the Padres are just, kind of polarizing, man. They're the 23rd best team in ERA. That's not great, right? The Padres struck out the 7th most batters. They've given up the 4th most hits. That's a problem. It's a big problem. So, at least they struck out enough guys to make a list in a positive way, but I just don't think they're doing all that well. On the plus side, Robert Suarez has 10 saves. He has a .66 ERA over 13 innings, or really 13 and 2/3, I should say. And it's a good thing the Padres picked up Dylan Cease, because he's carrying this entire pitching staff at this point. I'm sure you can agree with that. But who would have expected that Jurickson Profar would love playing in San Diego so much to be the player leading the team in total bases over the first fifth of the season or so. He's batting over 500 slug and pushing a 342 average. He really likes playing out there, I suppose, as he mentioned when he got re-signed in San Diego over the offseason. So, that's your bright spot, though. Where's Fernando? Where's Machado? Where's, the team that you expected to be pushing to look their best right at the moment? They may be second in this division, but I don't think it'll be for long. You? What do you think of the Padres, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good assessment. I mean, Profar has been like amazing to start off the year. Just in his last 13 games, 13
Mm.
hits, 6 RBIs, couple of home runs. I mean, let's remember, Warren, he's stepping into Juan Soto's shoes and he's doing it. Like no one expected, no one put that on him. Everybody knew that would be a hole and that even a good player would probably not be able to hit those numbers. And you could argue that he is. They're working to that level that Soto performed in San Diego. So pretty amazing on that side of things. Also, really cool that they got Machado at third base now. He has been struggling offensively, but I think having him settle in at third and having that defensive ability will kind of give him the confidence and hopefully get his swing back. We've seen a lot of players who struggle in a DH role and just perform better when they're at a certain position. And having him at third has allowed Campusano to get in more at DH when he's not starting. And even the rookie Graham Pauley, who struggled a lot more, kind of broke his slump with a home run off Aaron Nola, getting more opportunities in that DH role. So that's all exciting. But yeah, you mentioned it. Tatis Machado and Jackson Merrill, too, has really struggled here with this team, especially recently. And as good as the offense is, the pitching side is not good enough to keep up. Dylan Cease is still leading the way, but even he got roughed up in his last start, allowing 5 runs off 6 hits and just 5 Ks to 3 walks. And with King and Musgrove being hot and cold the way they are, and even Darvish now kind of looking like he once did, but there's not enough consistency here, Warren. You can't rely on anybody. I mean, the one saving grace has been when the offense does pop off, the bullpen has been good enough to secure leads for
Yeah.
them, and especially Robert Suarez with a .77 ERA, 9 for 9 in his last 9 save opportunities too, Warren. I mean, it's kind of like we talked about 3 aspects of the game that all these teams need to have. It's becoming clear that the Padres have the offense and the bullpen side of the ball down pretty well. Their defense is pretty solid too, but the pitching, the starting pitching, and even their early relievers are costing them opportunities at games, and it's going to be a problem all year from the looks of it.
Yeah, Musgrove has been especially disappointing. God, I'm just going to leave it at that because I think we did a good job of kind of breaking down why this team just isn't where we expected them to be. Let's see if they can improve, but you're right. Pitching has a lot to do with it, but also, as many of the offenses right now, consistency. You just need some consistency here. So, can they find some against Arizona? That both teams are scuffling a little bit. It'll be an interesting watch, I think, to see who comes out on top in that 3-game series before they head off to be hosted at Wrigley Field against the Chicago Cubs, another team conspicuously absent from the first portion of our show. But those are the first 15 teams of our power rankings this week. Have you enjoyed the format in which we break down exactly where everybody stands? I hope you have, because I've had fun. Who would have thought Tampa Bay and the Padres would bookend this half of the countdown? Dan, are we moving on to our next option?
Yeah, let's move it along and enter into the upper half of the power rankings, Warren.
I dig it, my friend. It's your choice. Who will kick it off? There's some interesting names still left on the board, and they only get better from here, guys. Buckle up. The best in baseball lie ahead. And they start with.
They start with the Milwaukee Brewers, who are still 8
Ooh.
games over 500 and still have a torrid offense that is carrying the team. Really exciting team to watch, and kind of want to nitpick on the pitching just a little bit. We mentioned the Wandy Peralta ejection earlier. That was kind of a whole strange situation, but it's unfortunate to see that there might be some extra suspensions coming his way because Wade Miley, unfortunately, was announced as going to be getting Tommy Johns, and that will be the end of his season.
Oh
And that just
man.
mounts injuries for this team. DL Hall is still out, so the starting pitching gets even more weak on the depth side of things. And
Hmm.
Christian Yelich is still out. Gary Sanchez is nursing some injuries. So even Jacob Eunice, Warren, took a
Yeah.
batted ball off the base of the neck in the outfield last week. Actually had
Ugh.
quite a scare from that, but he is trying to run right now and work his way back. So injuries are kind of starting to mount, and that showed this past week. Brewers just managed a 5-5 record, and it's come down to the wire on a lot of them. Got a shout out to Blake Perkins in the outfield, Warren. He secured
Mhm.
a Bruins 2-0 win by stealing what would have been a 3-run homer over the left field wall against the Cardinals. And I mean, it's plays like that are winning games for this team. But they're very much feeling like a team on the edge, the Brewers.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the ones I'm a little concerned about, some of these NL Central contenders already look a little unsustainable. I think it's pitching that may come down to be a big factor in which teams come out on top. It's the amount of stability that these rotations have. And the Cubs are one team that I think are shaky. I keep mentioning it. I think the Brewers are the other in this division. It could actually give way to teams like the Pirates sneaking in out of stability. And I'm just saying that. I mean, we're early enough in the season, it's not out of the question. And there's enough time to get some momentum. But it's a real conversation, I think, and not just one to gloss over, that the Brewers don't have much depth left. They're very fragile. They don't have a lot at all, period. So you're excited for whom they are and in rooting for them. You're impressed by the offense. There's been a lot to like out of guys like Reese Hoskins and Jackson Churio. And of course, can we talk about Wilson Contreras? He was a beast this past week, absolutely mashing most opportunities I saw him perform for. So it's disheartening to think the Brewers are one of those teams on the outside looking in when the playoffs start to loom here. But I think it's a real possibility if any more pitching casualties, and I mean at all, befall this team. And the schedule doesn't get any easier for them in the next week either, on top of all these concerns. Um, I like the Brewers. They've been a great story, but I'm definitely concerned. What do you think, man? How many more shots can this team take? I'm sure not many.
Yeah, no, it can all start falling apart very rapidly with just a
Hmm.
couple more key injuries. I mean, we're not going to jinx the Brewers here or anything. They've certainly been through enough, but let's just say that the offensive guys staying as healthy as they have, and most of the injuries being on the pitching side of the ball, is part of the reason this team is still so far above 500. And they
Oh,
needed to
and
stay that way. They need to stay top 10 in all those batting categories as they have.
on the plus side, they are third in stolen bases because of one Bryce Terrain. We have not mentioned him, and we should because he's been playing out of his mind and contributing a lot of positivity to this lineup. They are also fourth in home runs, so they've got speed and power on polarizing ends, Dan. Isn't that interesting? And that's a big part of their game plan is to hit both halves of the offensive possibilities with power and with speed. Then if they can score enough runs, which has been the case, their offense has been one of the most potent in baseball, really, overall, thus far into the season, then maybe they can buoy the storm some more. But it does show signs of running out of speed, maybe just when it starts to count the most. We'll have to stay tuned on that scenario in Milwaukee. Oh man, and they got the Cubs next. Gosh darn it. More fun. And then the Royals, by the way. And both those series are on the road. It does not get easier for Milwaukee. Are they close
Nope.
to breaking? We'll find out. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry. I
No, I was
stepped
just
on your
I was just
bubble.
agreeing with you. Yeah, it was a tough series and see what happens.
Yeah. A lot of these teams that we're about to talk about had tough series this week. I think I need to go with a team nobody probably expected to be this low. I suppose I didn't either, but I think the numbers will back up that I could put them here. How about our defending world champion, the Texas Rangers, who
Gonna
did
pick
not.
them next, Warren. You beat me to it.
Oh, yay! You did that to me with the Nationals, so good
Nice.
job. Yeah, we're doing this a little bit. So far we're not blowing each other's brains out, except I do notice, and I bet all of you do too, one team out there that is really poopy that we haven't brought up yet. But I'm happy for him, man. I love the concept of our show. Everybody rises, baby. The cream rises to the top, even if it's
That's
for a
right.
week. Let's go. Anyway, Texas Rangers are world champs. Talk about cream that should be rising to the top, but at this moment is a little thick, a little dense, right? A little
Gross.
gummy. Gross is the offense. The offense isn't great right at the moment. And I guess now we have to recognize that even the world champions are going to have lulls in their offensive output. Not everybody can be clicking at all times. I guess I would like to say Wyatt Langford hasn't quite been the phenom I thought he'd be on the offensive output with all the hype that was kind of behind him coming out of spring training. He's only hit one home run. He's got 11 RBI, I think, last I looked. This should be the stats. And I don't know. I know it's still early. The guy looks like One Punch Man. That's all. I just expect him to obliterate offenses by looking at him with one swing. He should be one swing man, Wyatt
Yeah.
Langford, but not yet. Adolis Garcia has also hit a tad bit of a snag, though he's an overall potent contributor to this specific lineup. And Corey Seager hasn't really been the barn burner you'd expect. It's just they're kind of shuffling between different key contributors that kind of come out of left field. I've noticed that amongst the batters that have been most consistent is Marcus Semien. Of course, Marcus Semien's been awesome and the core of this team. But Evan Carter maybe is the only other key contributor outside of Adolis Garcia who's taken a shift. It's just that Garcia's shift hasn't been recent, I suppose. Kirby Yates has been a great reliever for the Rangers recently. Pretty key. He hasn't given up a run in 12 innings of work. And he's also leading the team in saves for 5, which is not one of their strongest suits, by the way, statistically. Batting wise, they're still one of the most potent in baseball. Don't get us wrong, guys. 7th fewest in strikeouts. They're 7th best batting average as a team in the league. They're 8th in slugging, so when they hit it hard. And so don't forget their top 10 in home runs. 9 to be exact, guys. 9th in home runs. So they're a great team that right now just isn't playing like it. And they've got a lot more young pieces. This team is a lot different from last season's than I think we realized. I know I feel that way right now with the way the lineup looks. I think this is a good place for Texas, though. They went 5-5 this week. So they're not in the best position. They closed out a 4-game set on the road in Detroit by winning 3 of 4, and that was basically their bright spot. Detroit's been very plucky. Notice we haven't mentioned them. They then lost 2 of 3 to the Braves in a potential World Series preview. If we're both being bold and generous, the Mariners kept the woes going by offering 2 losses to the Rangers in Seattle, but bounced back at home when they faced the Cincinnati Reds and then Washington too. They got 4 victories out of 6, kind of slugging their way past the dynamic stolen-base team duo. Dan, I know I rambled on. How do you feel about Texas and our world champs?
I'd agree with you there. And it's something that stood out to me is their struggles against teams over 500. And that's not something that you want to see from that World Series team. And their offensive numbers are just not quite there like they were last year. And they're lagging behind in stolen bases in particular. So not doing themselves any favors. Some good notes, though. Nathaniel Lau is been put back at first base and has given them an 865 OPS. So very welcome for them with all the injuries that they've had and the impact bats that they've lost.
Mm-hmm.
And something else to note, Jack Leiter got called up for one start and kind of got roughed up.
Yeah, I
But
saw
he's
it.
been beyond stellar since being sent back down more and through 3 starts. He
Mhm.
is giving the Rangers a reason to call him back up and give him another chance. So that might be happening soon. But I don't know if you heard, the Rangers went out and signed Johnny Cueto to a minor league contract.
Oh,
Old
yeah.
man Johnny Cueto. So they're gonna try him out and see how he looks. And he managed to kind of get roughed up with Miami, I think it was last year, but he turned out he was nursing an injury that supposedly he's
Mhm.
recovered from. So might see him suit up for this Rangers team before long as reinforcement.
Ooh, I gotta tell you, I'm not a Ranger hater. I know they're in my division, and I do want to beat them, but they're not the Astros, and so I'm encouraged to see all the youth flying around this lineup, and I like watching these different players develop, and I expect different speeds from some of them, but I'm still just happy to see who Evan Carter's developing into as a player. It's a very dynamic lineup to watch. It's a fun team to watch. Stay tuned on the World Series champs. The Texas Rangers will be tough again. I definitely believe that. But an appropriate place to put them, if you don't mind me saying. Team number 13, lucky number 13, some would say, looms next. Are you ready to move on and tell us who picked your lucky number, Dan?
Yeah, things start to get a little bit tougher as we get in here. So I think it's time to get a little bit controversial here, Warren.
Okay.
Lucky number 13, let's throw the New York Yankees in there.
Whoa!
Why not? Let's give the Bronx Bombers a little bit more of a challenge. I don't know, Warren. This last
Dan,
week and a half, what?
oh, one of our key listeners is a Yankee fan. We're gonna alienate him by putting him here. Oh, you're mean.
Just
Oh, go ahead. Justify, justify, justify.
Oh, I don't know if I could justify. How about you're happy? You should be happy that you're in the still in the upper half of the league here. Like we know the Yankees are the
Ooh.
Yankees. Obviously, we understand they're a top 10 team in the league. They just had a bit of a rough week. They lost some games they probably should have won. Warren, I know you saw a few of them against Baltimore, against Oakland, and they
Mhm.
had a little bit of struggles where you would expect them to kind of crush these weaker teams or break out of these closer games. I mean, we mentioned Judge before, and it hasn't really changed. His slow start is kind of becoming an albatross for this
Ooh.
team, while Rizzo and Soto have been really good, and even Verdugo's gotten to go lately. That's holding the team back quite a fair bit. And the pitching side of things, they're going through a little bit of their struggles right now. Marcus Stroman, after starting off the year pretty well, has struggled recently. They gave Luis Gill an opportunity, and he did pretty well, has done pretty well, I should say, through a couple starts, 2.65 ERA and 20 Ks. So those are a little bit of the bright spots, but these were some winnable series this past week where the Yankees managed to go 5-6. Do think this division is not going to disappear on them. They'll have teams nipping at their heels. And
Mhm.
I think we need to see an Aaron Judge get out of this slump and score more runs for this team, because it's not like he's going up to bat with no runners on. He's leaving runners stranded. And we saw this recipe with the Yankees last year when Judge was hurt and how they struggled. And clearly they've made up from that from a depth perspective. But man, having Judge in the lineup and not performing is almost worse. It's tough to watch.
Wow. You know, burning the Yankees down after a 5-6 week, I guess it's fair to put them at this stage because yeah, the potential's there, but certain pieces aren't playing to the level that they should, and Judge is getting to be pretty noticeable in for that reason. And it was just a rough kind of week for them. They did score 2 of 3 from the toothless Rays before dropping 2 of 3, which was just tragic against their next opponent, which I mistook my notes, Dan. Pretty embarrassed. I
No
just
worries.
realized I put the Yankees there. So I hope you cut that. If nothing else, you ever cut, just cut that. Anyway, they bounced back, taking 2 fun games away from the Brewers in their 3 game set on the road, but didn't have enough heat to push over the Baltimore Orioles in their 4 game set in Maryland. The Yankees did drop 3 of the 4. Okay, So that's a pretty key divisional rival to let that many games go to at this stage. And that kind of deflates their tires a tad as they get ready for the Detroit Tigers next and the Houston Astros, who, as I just mentioned, might be playing with a little bit more oomph in the next 7 days, okay? But yeah, the Yankees are kind of lukewarm right at the moment. They're playing great defense, actually fifth in the league in defensive efficiency, which next week, Dan, fair warning, I'm going to ask you, how much does efficiency and defense really matter in winning baseball?
Hmm.
Have a good question preview there for you.
Interesting.
Anyway, um the pitching actually still sits though in the top 10 in most pitch ranking categories. They're first in saves, by the way. Clay Holmes has 10 and has yet to give up a single run in 15 innings pitched, it would seem. I mean, wow to that. This team does walk a lot of batters, both, by the way, on balls, but also on beans, whacking the hitters with their pitches. They're a very aggressive team, the Yankees. Another reason to not like them if you want to. Um, I root for them to turn this around, though, even though Juan Soto's kind of snot-nosed punk kind of personality. I just said it. Okay, I put that out there. He has still got a 1.9 WAR. Anthony Volpe's contributing 1.2 himself. Combined, by the way, that makes Mookie Betts' 3.1 WAR at this moment, when I last looked anyway. And this team does rank third in home runs behind Soto's 8 and Judge and Stanton both having 6 apiece. In some spotlights, right, those guys are off to great starts, but I suppose it's not good enough when Judge is whiffing in between his big moments so much. And we've seen that a lot with certain sluggers in the past years. It really does get ugly. Hopefully he breaks out soon, because he's the most likable part of the Yankees, who I do expect to still play major roles in playoff baseball when we get there, even though they sit currently outside of the top 12 team in baseball bubble that reflects the playoff window, or excuse me, the playoff bracket. Um, that will kind of be breaking down over the next several picks. Are you ready to move on, or did I kill the Yankees with you effectively enough in your mind?
Yes.
Oh, it's cool. I'm open-minded to letting Cleveland be in a position where they deflated enough. They were not one of the hottest teams this week objectively by record. My Cleveland Guardian love took a hit as they did lose a series to the Houston Astros just earlier this evening. Heartbreaking to know that that will signal an Astros resurgence incoming, ready to go. I can feel it. So the Guardians release the Hounds in my mind. They have to be punished. They belong outside the top 10 in baseball, but still make the playoff bubble. They have been really well, and it's really undeniable. So they're at 20 wins, one of the few teams to have that total at this point in the season, despite going 6-4 over the last week. But I watch this team and I watch a lot of their highlights, man, because I believe in their offense. They really seem to have found that identity. Stephen Kwan has been playing so well for this squad. And honestly, Jose Ramirez has gotten off to a slower start. So watching guys like Josh Naylor step up and contribute just as much potency as Jose Ramirez would hope to, honestly, is just really awesome to see. This team knows what they're doing. And the pitching's been really impressive too, in my mind, when it comes to the Guardians. Tanner Bybee currently is really leading the way for this group. I will say that it does feel like they're scrambling to fill holes. You don't see long starts from this group. You see lots of pitchers take the mound. You see lots of different arms take control of these games. And even though they're doing pretty well, you notice that the innings are kind of spread out more across a larger variety of pitchers on this team than some of the others around the league. And I think it's because they are also vulnerable a little bit to their pitching injury woes. This might not be as sustainable a push from them as we give way to the second part of the season. I do want to kind of foreshadow a little bit with them. Um, I feel the same concern for the Guardians as I will talk about with the Cubs later. How do you think, man? Am I being harsh to the Guardians? They are one of the best teams in baseball, but I do think they dragged their feet against some pretty key opponents this week, and they only went 6-4. They can't be that much of a heater.
Yeah, I mean it's slower than the pace they were at to start the year, but still a couple of bright spots, and I think overall the team is playing well enough to maintain the level of consistency that they have. Another shout out to Steven Vogt just being a great
Yeah.
first year manager and keeping the team like in the right headspace, because these kind of expectations can run away pretty quickly. But good vibes on the team. I don't know if you saw Josh Naylor's home run celebration where he just took the bat and just head butted it to himself. It was just amazing. Love that. And he has really exemplified what this team is doing this year, making the right little adjustments. Like one of his biggest holes in years past has been his struggles against lefty pitching. And big jump this year. He's improved it in years past, managed to get up to a 260 batting average. But this year he's up to 381 so far, and he's lowered his chase rate from 39.5% to 27.9. So the right kind of improvements. And you mentioned Tyler Beebe is really getting the spotlight that he probably deserves now with Bieber gone, and unfortunately Gavin Williams has setback in his recovery. So a little bit more spotlight on Tyler Beebe, and that's good for him to get. And yeah, overall, I agree with you, Warren. I think that this team's at a point now where we could probably expect a little bit more of them and some easy matchups coming up this week. I think we should see them climb up these rankings even more.
Yeah, they do have 3 against the Angels. They have 3 against Detroit, who, where are they in our discussions? And then 4 against the White Sox. So yeah, some tune-up series for sure. They're not being overly punished by the baseball gods for releasing the Astros. But I do firmly believe that we're on the precipice of something scary if Seattle doesn't shut them down. And I'm terrified. So legitimately terrified. Anyway, Cleveland rests here on our rankings, and it's your turn, Danny boy. Oh, Danny boy. Which team are you calling out as the 10th best in baseball? Or actually 11th. 11th, my friend.
Yeah, so we're right outside the top 10. I think this is a good spot, and they should be proud to be here for the Oakland Athletics, who had a really good week, definitely shot above their normal heavyweight, kind of what you would expect from them. Series win against Baltimore really speaks for itself, and Brent Rooker and Paul Blackburn continuing to be excellent. And like the news of the week to me, Warren, is that they've led the league with a 0 ERA from their bullpen. And I mean,
Right?
I'm sure you saw Mason Miller striking out Volpe, Soto, and Judge in succession to close out the win in the Bronx on Monday for a 2-0 win over the Yanks. I mean, they've all been excellent. We got to shout out Lucas Eckridge, who's allowed
Yep.
just 3 hits and 3 walks, 19 strikeouts through 7 appearances. I mean, I'm getting Moneyball vibes from this, Warren. Like getting all this value from all these guys that I think a lot of people never heard of. And hey, we got the next one already primed up, Warren. Shortstop, not catcher, shortstop Max Muncy. He's coming. He's been tearing his way up through the minors, and he will be with the big team shortly, I am sure. So a lot of exciting stuff for Oakland. Really good week for them.
Hey, Vegas, pay attention. Your young team is a bit of a reject, kind of like how the composition of the Vegas Golden Knights were when they first got started was all rejects. Like, let's get behind this team. Let's be excited because by the time they get to Vegas, maybe this athletic squad is one of the better ones in the division, and we should be blessed and grateful. Now, right now, they're showing flashes of that. But the flashes have put them in a better position than anybody expected them to be after the first month of baseball. Hello, they're ahead of the Astros. That's all you should have to say. That's the end of the argument. So the truth is that the Athletics played 7-3 ball this week, if you weren't paying attention. They may have been swept by the Guardians on the road, but then they split those 4 key games in New York, and then they took 2 of 3 from Baltimore, guys. What the heck? What an upswing. They used that upswing to sweep the Pirates. They had a heck of a week. This was a really good athletics team on display if you missed it. One of the biggest things that they've really been able to benefit from, in my mind, is that they've played with their first 5 starters only. They've only used 5 starters, an indicator of pitching stability, and it could be a part of the surprisingly positive start. At least they don't have to fill in gaps and have stress and holes in that area. Paul Blackburn's been a gladiator for them, and that is awesome. But sure, it's all about Mason Miller, Lucas Ursig, and Kyle Muller, and Mitch Spence in smaller bits, by the way. Those guys and the relieving crew have been almost a show in and of themselves out in Oakland. So very watchable baseball. It's surprising. Enjoy it while you can get it out of Oakland. I don't think they're going to be a Cinderella story all the way up to playoff season, but right now they're doing a lot of fun stuff. Oh, not to mention they're 7th in home runs, Dan. I don't know if you've noticed that, but 14 different players on their lineups have had home runs already. And I think that's kind of
How about that?
surprising. Yeah, there's a lot of different power. All these guys have got some SWAT in their game. And shout out to former Seattle Mariner Abraham Toro for getting regular playing time somewhere in the league. And thank you, yet again, finding a way to make it about the Mariners.
I think you called him a no-name a couple weeks ago.
Toro? Oh, I mean, as like a throwaway comment, you're probably right, but
True.
still a shout out.
Nice.
He is a no-name. I mean, compared to if you're looking at the list of third base situations across the league, Abraham Toro is a no-name, and you know it. So
Yeah, well, he's 10th on our power rankings right now, so.
Ooh, yeah, because covering our bases, rankings are climbing the ranks in podcast rankings out there. We know it. We just know it. This format rocks. We're within. I don't know if you know this, but on our notes on the back end, guys, I just put in 10th for our power rankings, Abraham Toro, literally, because of what you just said, Dan. I am so focused and locked in. Not too many teams left that had rough weeks on the record, so I guess if we're being
in the top 10, Warren.
controversial, yeah, right? Like, top 10
top 10
team here. I like the Kansas City Royals for a top 10 team at this point. And I think they slot in beautifully here. Shout out to the way a young stud should be playing when you look at Bobby Witt Jr. and his 2.1 WAR. He's been incredible. Salvador Perez is getting off to a hotter start than I think he's had at this stage of any previous season in his career. So it's feel-good baseball. Yeah, just the way you said that. I heard it in your tone. You're like, yeah, man. God bless Salvi. They're playing good out in Kansas City overall, but only good enough for a top 10 sitting tonight. They did go 6-4. There's no shame in losing a set to Baltimore. And way to win 3 out of 4 hard-fought victories over the Blue Jays. That was at home at Kauffman Field, but the Blue Jays that was like the last time they looked like scrappy in their week. So kudos to them for being, for the Royals for being ready for that until at least the next time they faced the Jays, which was later on in the week, actually, now that I realize it. Tigers did adjust their game plan and prove dangerous by taking 2 of 3 of Kansas City between their 2 sets with the Jays, however. But the Royals have largely turned back Toronto's team, and that's held them pretty steady here and good enough to remain at 10th in the league. Their pitching efficiency rating sits at 21st, and this was a team in my mind that I thought would be quite good at that because they have committed the fourth fewest errors in the league. So I have to say I'm a little surprised to see them not higher up in that ranking. It makes me again want to question you, Dan, next week on how much that really matters. No one projected the Royals to have this improved of a rotation, and I think we should talk on that. They have the fourth lowest ERA in baseball. They are tied with the Red Sox for third fewest home runs allowed. And by the way, in case you didn't know, because of where the Red Sox sit in the pitching rankings across the league, that's pretty darn good company. They have only needed 6 different pitchers, so the stability is there. And Seth Lugo has truly been awesome in pitching the most innings in the league so far this year, and he does carry a pretty unbelievable 1.6 ERA. Cole Reagan's one of their young studs, does lead the team with 11.3 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched, and his 49 Ks appropriately lead the team. So they've got a couple of arms that make them one of the most impressive pitching staffs in baseball, and we didn't see that coming when we were breaking them down before the season started, did we, Dan?
Well, I gotta say, Warren, I put some pretty good expectations on this pitching staff. The Royals addressed it. They made a lot of acquisitions, and we did expect some level of improvement. But you're right, they are overperforming, and everybody's kind of hitting their stride right now, and they're taking advantage of that. I will say that the bats are a little bit more disappointing than where I would like to see the Royals, and certainly you got guys like you mentioned, Bobby Witt and Salvador Perez, and Vinny Pascantino is kind of coming down to earth a little bit. His defense has been fantastic, but his bat's slowing up a little bit, and it's not as well rounded as what you'd like to see. It's been okay because of the talent coming out from the pitching side of the ball. They've been all right, managing 2 to 3 runs per game. But this team league wide is struggling as far as RBIs are concerned. They rank. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong one. They're kind of middling with a lot of their offensive stats, 12th in home runs, 15th in hits. And you mentioned some of the other ones that definitely shows that they have a lot of power on this team. They have the ability to get out there. But yeah, the pitching is definitely holding them up right now. A lot of that plus 50 run differential has been their pitching holding talented teams to less runs than what they're used to. So yeah, really happy to see the Royals taking advantage of this. And, injuries happen and a lot of this stuff isn't sustainable throughout a whole year. So we'll see how long the Royals can kind of keep this momentum going. And, that division really is, we can argue, the most competitive in all of baseball right now, Warren. So love to see how they stack up in a couple of these divisional games coming up.
Yeah, it's true. They are one of the more interesting divisions. Both central divisions really turned out to be more interesting than we expected. Honestly, if I'm being frank, guys, it's very watchable still in baseball land. There aren't very many bad teams, and there aren't very many teams that have a clinch on their division, right? Everything still feels super up in the air, and you'll love to see it because the duality between the league means more entertaining baseball for a longer period. The longest season of sports in the sporting year should be interesting, wouldn't you think? Uh, but the Kansas City Royals are a great pick for one of the more interesting teams at number 10. Number 9, Dan, goes to you, my friend. I am excited because we can only get more and more hyped from here. And there aren't very many teams to sneeze at left to talk about today.
Yeah, we're up in the upper echelon now, and we're talking about good baseball teams. So I think for the 9 spot after a pretty good week, we're going to go with the Philadelphia Phillies. And
Whoa.
yeah, it was a good week for the Phillies, and we've talked about some of their offensive struggles over the the previous weeks to start the season. But kind of the big news, Trey Turner and Alec Bohm are really coming into their own. They're actually number 3 and 4 respectively, Warren, in BABIP. Trey Turner with a 410 and Alec Bohm with a 409. So that's like that combination of talent and luck, like we talked about when we saw Mookie up there on that board a couple weeks ago. So this is resulting in 45 hits from Turner and 42 from Alec Bowman, nearly a 500% average on those balls when they're hit and play. So and both of these guys are under 30 strikeouts. So that's very much what you want to see. And it kind of tells more of the story of that slugging team coming out of Philly like we knew that they could. They're second in home runs right now, and I could definitely see they're seventh in slugging overall. Yeah, I could definitely see that continue to rise as some more time goes on. Even have a little bit more stolen bases, 11 so far in the team through their last 10 games. The Phillies
Right.
are finally starting to get a little bit of the momentum. The pitching side of the ball is settling into the second month. They lead the NL with a 3.4 ERA at this point, and
Mm.
second best in baseball over April, behind only Boston for that period of time. And we should also mention Taiwan Walker is back and made his first start, going 6.1 innings pitched through against San Diego. And he's been pretty good, but one of their best starters while Walker was out was Spencer Turnbull. And there was a lot of conversation whether he would be moved to the bullpen or not when Walker came back. And it turns out that's exactly what they did. They pulled Turnbull back into the bullpen. It's going to give them a lot more support and strength back there. And he's going to stay fresh in case he is asked to be a starter again. So a lot going right for Philly. They've addressed a lot of those issues we talked about in weeks past. Really happy to see what they can do as these next couple weeks go on. I think they have a couple winnable series ahead.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. First up has got to be the San Francisco Giants on that, and you got to expect them to win that with how dominant they've been compared to where San Francisco's at right now, and then they've got two against Toronto. So fascinating stuff coming out of Philadelphia because they also lead the league in strikeouts. I mean that's huge. They've got a lot of pop and they've got a lot of whiff well, against their opponents anyway. So they look great. And, Alec Boehm is one of my favorite glue guys in the league. He's on my virtual Mariners in my MLB The Show campaign. And he's leading this team in offensive WAR with 1.8 and has one of the higher batting averages in the league with a 366. And by the way, Turner, of course, is not behind at 1 and 6 WAR, but he is, looking up to a guy I didn't expect that he would be at this stage. And Kyle Schwarber is a beast on the base pads. We were talking about that before recording. He's been so impressive and playing really great in the leadoff position. And Brandon Marsh continues to be a bright spot for this offense. I mean, the Phillies are just a potent team and a right choice to be sitting at this place in the rankings. They don't look to be going anywhere. And I told you, Dan, that they wouldn't be sinkers again a couple weeks back. And so far, so good.
Yep.
Yup. Hey, their counterparts in that division, I think, have to go next. I know! It's insane to think the Atlanta Braves are not one of the top three teams after all the power rankings you've seen online that put them in one or two for the last 6 months. And I get that, but they had a rough week compared to some of these other squads, capped off by, yeah, I'll say it, dropping an unexpected series to the Mariners, which I'm not insanely blowing totally out of proportion. I think we got pretty lucky, but a loss is a loss is a loss. So I have to count it. And Atlanta did struggle against a couple other series as much as Atlanta does. I mean, fun fact, Dan, did you know that the only teams to beat the Braves in a series of baseball during the season so far are the Mariners, of course, because it happened recently. But the other are, of course, your New York Mets.
Yeah, that's right. I remember it. I remember it well.
How cool that we get to tie that together to this amazing Braves team. I mean, let's make no mistake. This is an extremely tough team to beat. My hat is off to them. I have such total respect for the Braves, and they were a riser coming into this conversation. But when I look at the wins and losses, the truth is the integrity of the concept to me is broken if I pick the Braves. After the fact, as I said, they dropped a key series this week, and they looked like a team that could be beat. Gave a little bit of a blueprint, did the Mariners rotation when they played this team, with the exception, of course, of Emerson Hancock. Making it too much about the Mariners, I know. Hey man, go ahead, take it away. I know you watch a lot of Braves baseball. They're a divisional rival, and I know how great they really are. You'll remind us all of that, I'm sure, and put me in my place. But I do have Atlanta at this stage of our rankings.
Yeah, you mentioned them, the Mariners taking 2 out of 3 from the Braves, and I would still say the Braves have yet to stumble in the way we've seen the Yankees or the Dodgers. So to me, they're still a step ahead of
Hmm.
everybody else, even with a few losses this week. I mean, Chris Sale has looked excellent. He looks clearly healthy because he looks like he did a few years ago before dealing with all the injuries that he did in Boston. And now Ozzy Albies is back, and Sean Murphy is going to be coming back pretty soon. So nothing but bright times ahead for this roster. And you just got to shout out, like, I think Warren Marcelo Ozuna needs to be in the conversation for the home run title this year because so far he's right there with Tyler O'Neill, and he was behind Trout and Gunnar Henderson for a while. Trout is obviously out of the running now. And you know what? He's slugging more than Gunnar is in less at bats. So I don't see why Ozuna, if he stays healthy and in the lineup, can't be in the conversation for most home runs in the league this year. He's on that pace, Warren.
It's cool to see. He's hit a whole new tier in his career right now for his output, and you love to see it. And if it can, I mean, just to be happy for a guy. That's how I feel anyway. Lots of offensive output. Ozuna's playing entertainment baseball, as are the Atlanta Braves as a whole. This is not a weak squad at all. I just can't help it, but slide out the frisbee at this stage due to the wins and losses. And Travis d'Arnaud checked into the offense too, though. Really put up a lot of great numbers this past week. I think I remember he kind of got off to a quick 5 home runs and batted in a total of 11 RBI. At least in the first portion of period of time since you and I spoke, like he came on hot. And this whole lineup has the potential to do that at any moment. So hit your pitching spots, guys, against the Braves. They will make you pay for it. If you don't, we all know that. Probably the best team in baseball still. Just saying. But number 9 to us, because well, I'm pretentious. Hooray for format, Dan. It matters. Your pick, big guy.
Yeah, so before we kind of get to the top few teams left, I think at this point it's a good place to stick to the Detroit Tigers, who probably a few spots higher than they have been recently for us. And you know what? They had a really good week, and especially I've noticed that they've done really well on the road, Warren. They're 10-4 so far on the road, and they have a couple of road matchups coming up in this next week. But got to point out that while the offense has been good, been pretty inconsistent, especially from the younger bats out of the lineup. You know, guys like Riley Green, Wenzel Perez, and Canna, of course, are over 300 and have done really well. But specifically over these last couple weeks, some of the younger guys, Colt Keith, Spencer Torkelson, Kelly Carpenter, even Parker Meadows, are all really struggling. And that offense is kind of dried up and has attributed to several of these losses that the Tigers have had. So still managed 8 wins, and the run differential sank a little bit, but it is still positive for right now. There's still a lot of upside for them. But yeah, I am a little worried about Detroit. Well, you can see how they do on these couple road trips they have in New York and Cleveland coming up.
Yeah, the right kind of test for a Royals team like this. They had one of the better weeks in baseball, going 8-5. And they, well, took 3 of 4. No, dropped 3 of 4, I should say, to the Rangers, playing the world champs really tough in that series, though. And then they became the last team to beat the Twins in a series, and in no in excuse me, in Minnesota, no less. Like, that's crazy. And then took 2 of 3 against the Rays, and then again against the Royals. So they won against some pretty, interesting teams, as much as the Rays have kind of stepped back, obviously, this past week. Finally, they took down the Cardinals 2 out of 3 on the road, or was it at home? Either way, victory is a victory over the Cardinals to complete a truly solid stretch of games from this intriguing squad. I mean, they can beat just about anybody right at the moment at this stage of the season. I mean, Jack Flaherty's got 50 strikeouts, one of the top leaders in that statistic, second in the league, if I remember correctly. Jason Foley's got 9 saves, tied for second in the league with several other pitchers. And Tariq Skubal has been incredible, looking truly legit. He's got a 172 ERA across 36 and 2 innings pitched. Like, strong rankings, strong ratings. And Reese Olson and Casey Mize have been contributing a lot in the back half of the rotation too. Some decent stability with their just above 3 ERAs respectively. So, and the offense has been the concerning part. You're totally right. I realize that Riley Green, Mark Canna, Kerry Carpenter, like they're doing the majority of things offensively for the squad, and you got to have a little bit more oomph. They may be somebody in the market for a guy who could really swing the bat because, like Spencer Torkelson's actually kind of dragging them down. He has a negative .7 defensive WAR so far, and that's taking away from his offensive output. So there's a lot of questions in Detroit, but they're fighting really hard right now in the meantime, like really impressively hard. So it's interesting to think how long they can hold the fight out and how much the fight might get taken out of them by two legitimate American League contenders, truly, in the Guardians and the Yankees, even though, as you put it earlier, the Yankees have had a rough week too. We'll see. We'll see. It'll be a very interesting series between those two teams, especially. Good choice at number 7. We've reached the risers portion of our show. We have but 3 picks left and the top 6 teams in baseball to review. I hope you've enjoyed this format, everybody. I know I quite like the flow. Hopefully we can bring this back moving forward. And what do you think, Dan? Enjoying yourself? You like the...
Yeah, I think our power rankings are pretty fun and a little bit unexpected. Having the Yankees at 13 behind Oakland and 11 is my favorite so far.
Yeah, and realizing a couple of my risers have stepped out of the spotlight I intended for them, literally as we fired up the recording tonight, team. Like, this is what's fun about covering our bases. The truth of the matter is that the teams that are left just had better weeks than some of these other teams. And so here's where they sit. My number 6 team, I'm going to give credit to the Boston Red Sox, who have been a massive thorn in everybody's side and deserve to be acknowledged as a riser for that reason. Not to mention, folks, they're the number 1 team in the league in not many. They're in the top in many pitching stats. They are number 1 in ERA, and nobody saw that coming, including us, including Sports Center, including all the other, well, sports brands I shouldn't mention so they don't come after us. But it's just incredible stuff what Boston has done on the mound. And they've played some teams really, really tightly, including a certain Chicago Cubs team that struggled against them in Fenway over this past weekend. But the Red Sox just look good, man. They look good. I'm a little concerned about Rafael Devers and some of the defensive things I notice out on the left side of the infield or right, depending on which way you're looking at it. Of course, I'm talking about third base and shortstop, especially. Like, I think there's some things about Boston's composition that is unsustainable, like you mentioned a few weeks ago. I don't think it's a long-term, thing that we're talking so highly about Boston as the season goes on, but right now they just play good baseball and hang tough with a lot of strong teams that we don't expect them to. And you kind of have to give it up to them, don't you, Dan? Give it up to him a little bit. Come on, a little golf clap for Boston from the New York guy,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been really respectable. The pitching goes without saying. It's been frankly incredible. And,
Yeah.
unfortunately, Masataka Yoshida is gonna hit the IL, which is not great for them. Yeah, I didn't need that. But there's been enough bright spots around. They've been kind of rotating through a number of younger players to fill in for all the injuries that they have, as far as position players. And you mentioned Devers Warren. He's for sure playing beat up. He's taken a few injuries that he's come back from quickly so far this year. So I'm sure he's just that's a result of that. But like shout out to Willie Abreu, who's got 18 hits and 10 RBIs so
Yeah,
far through just 11 games, slashing
yeah.
409 for 727 OPS. I mean, that's been excellent. Should see Vaughn Grissom coming back this weekend. And they've also made a few trades around the league to try and address some of these issues. They just spent cash on Garrett Cooper from the Cubs and Zach Scott from the Mets, give them a couple extra guys that they can rely on and throw out there for a few innings. So, it's kind of unpredictable, to be honest, and keep on waiting for the whole thing to fall apart. But Boston is making the right moves to stay competitive and stay in there. And the bullpen has just been incredible for them. Like they are leading the way in so many of those statistics that it's kind of incredible how much they're keeping them in the game in all other aspects. So yeah, amazing to see what Boston is doing and kind of just like rooting for them now, to be honest. Warren, not wouldn't hate it if they came out of that division on top at this point, gotta say.
Ooh, interesting call out. And it's not completely out of the question, but there are pretty interesting notches in their armor that do need to be covered up and cleaned up in order to be really ready to go hard against Baltimore and New York in the long run. And even still, Toronto, you never know, could switch it on, could figure it out. And yeah, it's still Tampa down there. They were a playoff team for the last forever. So at the end of the day, this is one of the toughest divisions in baseball still, and anything can happen. Super fun to watch what Boston has achieved, though, and they've made me a fan. I knew I liked Jaron Duran. I mean, mention him real quick. Put some respect on that one. He's got the team leading WAR of 1.6 so far, but yes, Wilyer Abreu has been great recently, adding 1.5 of his own. And Tyler O'Neill looks like he's ready to win a home run derby himself. He's got 9 so far and poised to top that total quickly. So, yeah, Boston's really interesting. They're playing well. You love to see it. Cool to have them be part of a tight race instead of a distant fifth like we projected. I think they're having a great time showing everybody out there who doubted them that Boston Red Sox baseball is alive and well. Well, the top 5 have arrived, Dan, and this next team, I think, well, is one of my favorites in the league to track, and I can't wait for you to break it down for us. Go for it.
Yeah, we got to give the next spot to the Chicago Cubs, who had a
Mm.
really good week, won a couple of really tough matchups, and just really impressed me because Warren, they've had so many injuries recently. Obviously, we know what's been going on with Hendricks and Cody Bellinger is out, Seiya Suzuki is out, a lot of their bright spots. And the Cubs are still finding ways to win games. That Wicks has been great starting for them when he's had opportunity, and obviously Imanaga and Jameson Taillon has settled down and been excellent as well. So the pitching has just improved massively, and all the rookies that they've called up are starting to do better. Pete Crow Armstrong was a little bit late, but
Oh, yeah.
had a few breakout hits against the Mets. Michael Bush has had his opportunity, and we've seen a lot of improvement from these guys in some of these harder situations. I will say where defense was definitely one of the bright spots of the Cubs this last series against the Mets. They made a whole lot of errors. Two of the games rather that they lost, they probably could have won if it wasn't for some on-field mistakes. A lot of that is from the rookies, but also from some Gold Glovers. So that's a little bit unfortunate to see, but they have just been so consistent on top of all of this that when a lot of these injured guys do come back, it's kind of scary to imagine how talented this Cubs team can be. So yeah, they definitely are a riser for me this week, Ward.
Yeah, I want to see the whole of the parts come together because, I picked this team to be the stable stalwarts to emerge from the NL Central, and I want to see the prophecy come true with as strong a composition of players as possible. There's some question marks that can get in the way of that. But yes, Pete Crow Armstrong has been exciting since coming back, doing what the Cubs would wish out of Cody Bellinger, and now without him, they've needed someone to fill that void, and they've got it more that so than they expected. There's a certain level of destiny feeling like it's coming together around Chicago right now, protecting them and armoring them from some really tough challenges and speed bumps. Justin Steele, of course, was the famous injury right out of the gate for this squad that felt like it should have derailed them, but hasn't. They're hanging tough with a
Derailed my
very
fantasy team.
yeah, poor guy. At least you still have Kirby, who's starting to battle back and
Yep.
should soon get into the threes. I made it about the Mariners. I'm a
There it
god.
is.
Anyway, my subsequent and important carryover. The Cubs are just they're a tough team you got to respect right now. They're playing really well. There's some key Michaels on their lineup like Bush and Tuckman who have played very well and contribute a lot of great offensive highlights and moments for them. Good power. They're a team that can beat most teams 2 out of 3. At least it feels that way. So I'm excited to be able to see what continued storms these Cubs can weather, and hopefully they can keep going. There's always a chance the bottom could fall out. Up next, though, is the Milwaukee Brewers. For them, 3 games at home with the Brewers will be a cool check between the two leaders in that division. Who's truly stiffer at this moment? And then the San Diego Padres will be after that. So a little bit of an easier series for Chicago. Maybe they can lick some wounds soon, but no, they're in the pit, this team. This is one that will be fighting for the majority of the season. I don't see them getting a lead, for example. Well, Dano, with that team out of the way, only 4 remain, and I see 2 teams that I suppose acknowledge. I acknowledge I didn't expect to be risers, honestly, on this list that are left. I'm super excited to talk about this next squad. Anyway, for the Baltimore Orioles. So good are those Orioles, but they did have a couple of key slip ups this week. I'm looking at a series in which they were swept by the Pirates, or no, I think the Pirates got 2 out of 3 from them. I gotta look at it again, and I'll bring it up in a second. But the Baltimore Orioles are my 4th best team in baseball right at the moment. They look really good. They consistently play some top-notch baseball. They did just take 3 of 4 from the New York Yankees, and that was honestly the biggest deciding factor to keep them as risers for me, even though they did have, that's right. I think they were swept by the Athletics, right? That was the weird series for them this week, something wild like that. But the Baltimore Orioles are still continually trucking pretty reliably, and I don't see them slowing down. I think they're picking up one more interesting key to the rotation soon, if I'm not mistaken, giving them more diversity of potent arms. And they've got some key relievers like Yenie Kano. He's been a pivotal reliever, putting up 16 innings with 2.25 ERA and a team leading 7 holds. He's been really important to them in key situations. So I've also seen the offense, one of the finest offenses work out of Baltimore so far this year. They're number 1 in home runs, 2 in RBI, 3 in runs scored, 10th fewest strikeouts in the league, 6th in batting average overall, and 1st in slugging. And you look up and down this lineup, and everywhere you look, there's a new face ready to step in and be like, hey guys, I can hit too. I mean, all this young talent swirling around Baltimore, they're just so exciting. One piece of talent that's not swirling around Baltimore again is Jackson Holiday, who got sent down. That was a bit of a surprising move. All right, yada, yada, yada. Weigh in on the Baltimore Orioles at number 4 in our power rankings. Dan, do you agree, or should they have been even slightly higher?
I think it's a good spot for them. It was disappointing to see Holiday sent down, but hopefully he'll be back with the team after, just getting some good strong at bats at an easier level for a little while. And yeah, not a lot of downsides on the offensive side of the roster. Cedric Mullins and Kauser both kind of struggled of late with the 167 and 176 batting averages, respectively. At least Kauser is getting on base. He's got 6 walks to match his 6 hits. just 14 strikeouts over that period of time. But other than that, the rest of the team has been pretty strong. Gunnar Henderson is leading the way with 5 home runs. Not as much home run power we're seeing as far as the rest of the team is concerned. But you mentioned the pitching side of things, and it's crazy to think that Grayson Rodriguez just got hurt. Tyler Wells is still going to be out for a while, and John Means and Kyle Bradish are still out. They're both getting closer to return, which is great because they need it. But without all these guys, the rotation for the O's has still managed a 3.82 ERA. And
Mm-hmm.
Cole Irvin and Albert Suarez are these guys that are standing out for them. And the bullpen for them is a 4.03 average for the team, which is pretty mid. It's kind of in the middle. You mentioned some of the guys are doing really well. And obviously, Kimbrough on the back end has been great with a 1.59 ERA. But yeah, the starters have been admirable. And when these reinforcements come through, it's going to be scary to see how good this Baltimore team could be. And yeah, they're meeting expectations so far. As hopefully some of these other younger guys can break out of some of these slumps we've been seeing lately.
Oh, sure. They have enough leeway that they can afford some of these guys to rotate hot and cold, hot and cold, and you love to see it for a culture that's needed to rebound, and it's fun to see a different team atop this division looking like you want to see them continue to fly, literally and figuratively. Up next for them is Cincinnati, who will be plucky, and then Washington, right? This is the speedster duo I mentioned earlier, and Baltimore could get ambushed and caught off guard on these, and you got to be careful against everybody still at this stage of the season. Hopefully, Baltimore weathers the storm just fine, and some of these other arms do return. I will say, if you don't mind, Dan, don't want to be rude, but Kyle Bradish did return today. He
Oh,
pitched today's outing against the Yankees, and it was for a win. So, welcome
well, there
back,
we
Kyle
go.
Bradish. He looked good. He was painting corners, riding edges, and really kind of kept the lineup off kilter for the Yankees until later innings. So, kudos to him. And yeah, a good sign for Baltimore, who, yeah, have a lot of assets out, but as they come back, will only get stronger. And an embarrassment of riches is Baltimore, and they have a lot of momentum and reason to believe that it's theirs to lose in so many ways out in the American League East and beyond. Well, three teams left, Dan, and I know two of them off the top of my head. Oh, I think I remember the third. Oh, this is gonna be fun. Who do you have at your number third team overall?
All right, top three, Warren. Here we go. So I think after a really good week, the third spot belongs to the Seattle Mariners.
Let's go!
And
I want to.
I know you've managed to talk about them for every other team we've talked about tonight, but I want to hear what you have to say about this. My main takeaways, I noticed that Julio Rodriguez worked his way to seventh on the BABIP chart in the top 10 with a 395. So starting to get things going from there. And I also noticed a young Jonathan Clase has been doing pretty well for an injured Dom Canzone. That's been pretty impressive to see them getting a little bit better performance there. And then obviously you mentioned the struggles of the offense, but the pitching really coming into their own. The starters are finding their way. They rank in the top 10 of ERA among starters and relievers. And they're just starting to see that classic pitching staff we knew we would see in
Mm-hmm.
Seattle. They had a really good week, 7 wins to only 3 losses, got over 500 and got their differential over 9. So seems like everything's going the right way for Seattle. Would you say, Warren? What do you think?
Who, you know what? I didn't want to be the fan who came on here and called his team a riser and like gloated and stuff, because legitimately I'm grateful for the way we've won these last 5 series. I did suggest last week that if we, or, in recent conversations over baseball, that if we beat the Rangers, or if we beat the Diamondbacks, or if we beat the Braves, I might consider calling us, not disappointing. And then we went and beat all of them. So I feel like in series, guys, in series. So I feel like if I don't call him a riser and celebrate them right now, then I'm missing an opportunity to give him a lot of credit because the pitching has been incredible, and we know that. That's what everybody talks about when it comes to this team because the offense deserves to be overlooked. I will totally acknowledge that we're number one in most strikeouts as an offense. I will totally acknowledge that a lot isn't going well from key bats on this lineup, like Julio. Like, sure, Julio is getting his singles and his doubles. We want homers. And while he has had his first one since the last time you and I talked, Dan, it's only been his first one. And it's been guys like Polanco, or in one key situation, Garver, or Raleigh, who's still sitting at 6 right at the moment for home runs, but still whiffing a ton, right? Like, it's feast or famine for Seattle's offense, and we don't need to play that way. I have watched this team move the bat around the lineup and pick apart a pitcher. Like, they don't need to behave in this feast and famine kind of mindset, and it has to change, and I believe it will change, and it's the redemption arc of our season. But Seattle does deserve to look and feel good after the last 5 series that they've had, sweeping the Reds, taking 2 of 3 from the Rockies, and it's totally understandable the one they lost. Trust me, they deserved it. Um, then they get the 2 of 3 from the Rangers, 2 of 3 from the Diamondbacks, 2 of 3 from the Braves in a way that nobody expected. But I totally recognize that a good, healthy portion, especially against the Braves, was luck. Like, man, real timely coaching, good chess, but also luck. So I think our offense needs to wake up before we get to continue to be risers. Our offense needs to learn how to be at least par. And then after that, we might actually look like a really good team. But right now, we're just living by our pitching, as many thought we would. But I'm glad we're living. Don't get me wrong. I am super grateful right now that we are living. Go Mariners. Feels great. But now we have to kill the Astros. That's super important. I can't
Yes.
stress that enough. Please kill the Astros. They have a glimmer of hope in their hearts that must be stamped out. And then after that, by the way, the Mariners are in line to try to stifle another hot offense that we haven't talked about yet, but we'll have to talk about because it's one of the only 2 teams left to break down. Our top 2 teams progress now with the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers are still the Dodgers. They're still crushing the majority of the teams around the league. It's not a surprise, and it's okay to put them, I think, as a riser at this point. It's been a few weeks, and I don't know if they've been risers at any point in our show, but they've played well enough that they deserve to be acknowledged as one of the best teams in baseball, even though we already knew that. Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani haven't been on Mookie Betts' level. Last I checked, he had a 3.1 WAR. He's been so out of this world, but there are some other players who might make a run at him. We talked about that earlier, like Ozuna. But this group just plays really good team baseball, and everybody's just playing well. You look at Teoscar Hernandez. Oh, guys, sorry. Oh, I skirted right past this. Yeah, we got a couple of strikeout counters we want to acknowledge moving forward. One of them is the Teoscar counter, which currently sits everybody at I think it's 45 strikeouts. Good for 4th in the league is Teoscar's total. Okay, 4th highest in the league. The Mariners also need to have their own strikeout total because as long as they're the worst strikeout team in the league, I'm going to call it out. And we're at 311 right now. No love songs for that, guys. 311 strikeouts for my Mariners. Clean it up, boys. Stay away from the low and outside. Stay away from the low and outside. Do I need to say it again, Dan? Do you think they got
I
it?
should, to be safe.
Stay away from the low and outside.
There you go.
Thanks. Thank you. But Teo, yeah, he's struck out 45 times, so there's your Teo counter. But, the Dodgers are just so good. They win baseball games, and they win a lot of them. And they beat some quality teams this past week, so let's go ahead and just acknowledge where they're at right now, playing just good baseball. Um, and doing it pretty easily. Tyler Glasnow's been out of this world. I think he's leading in some major pitching stats, and I think like total innings are right up there with them. And you're not surprised again, but it's been great, huge addition for the Dodgers. You just like the baseball they're playing. Go ahead, Dan. Bail me out. What else is good about the Dodgers? There's a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned Glasnow and Yoshim has really come around. Like Yamamoto's last few starts have been really,
Hmm.
really good. So glad to see him finally settling. And this team's few losses are the rare events where like that MV3 is left on base or struggles at the plate, right? And that has not happened much, especially Mookie and Betts have both been excellent. And Mookie, who's sixth in BABIP, down a little bit from where he has been recently, but with almost a 400 batting average, leading the league in a whole ton of offensive categories. He's been better than Otani still, and it's incredible. And we're going to keep on shouting it out because it's an amazing that he's doing this while playing shortstop. It really does, I think, provide a huge test case for the power of giving a player confidence in a position and how that can affect them at the plate. Like I really think he's selling that story right now. And yeah, I mean, Bueller should be back any day now, and bullpen is still beat up a little bit, but Black Training is a name that should be coming back too. So still a few names. Oh, I believe Hayward is still out with a back injury as well, which isn't doing
Uh,
him any favors. So there's been a few injuries, but the Dodgers are still winning games where they need to be, and definitely deserve to be towards the top of our rankings here. It's going to take a really tough week to knock them down a peg, I think, Warren.
Yeah, I mean, I think they ended up risers because 8-2, they had the one of the winningest team records of the week, and I just couldn't deny that. They get ready to tune up with the Atlanta Braves coming to town, guys. How about that for the series to watch? It's the Dodgers and the Braves. Everybody wants to see it. I want to see it. It kicks off tomorrow, Friday, for you. Today, the 3rd. It kicks off today, the 3rd. I hope you're watching it. I will be watching it. I'm stoked for it. And then Miami is going to come and, well, feed them. Feed the Dodgers. You know that. Have you seen that lawn commercial, dude, Scott's?
Oh,
Fe-
dude, yeah, I hear it on the radio for the last few years, but I
oh,
have seen them this year.
feed the Dodgers. Feed them. All right. Bring it home, my guy. That's the only perfect record for the week. Of course, everybody. I'll not take Dan's thunder. Who is the best team in baseball and will probably never say it again?
Dude, with a 10-0 week, the longest win streak in the franchise's history. Number one is the Minnesota Twins. And wow, Warren, after all of the crap we gave them a week ago, this team was 7-13. Now they're 17-13 with a
Hey.
positive run differential, and it's a whole new story. And I tell you why, Warren, the thing that's changed is the home run sausage. They brought the home run sausage into the dugout, and I don't know why, but it's gross and I love it because
Oh
it's
my
working,
God.
Warren. Before the sausage, let me tell you, the Brewers 3.7 runs per game, slash line of 195, 281,
Hmm.
329. Abysmal, right? We all talked
Hmm.
about the injuries and everything else. Well, Byron Buxton may be down, but Carlos Correa has come back.
Yay.
Now with the sausage in full swing, 8.1 runs per game, up from 3.7. Now they're slashing at 348, 406, and 602. I mean, they've more than doubled some of these statistics, Warren. You can't deny it. The home run sausage is real and it's here. You have Carlos Santana going off in the stretch, 4 home runs and 11 RBIs. The whole roster has elevated their batting average over 200, and a lot, almost half, are over 300 right now. So it's all about the home run sausage in Minnesota. They are riding the momentum and they are carrying it to heights that we haven't seen from this franchise before. And frankly, Warren, with the schedule they have coming up, Seattle on the horizon might be something to worry about, but a couple games against Boston, Minnesota might be able to keep this going.
Oh my God, stop. Stop it. This is obscene. The number one team in baseball being the Minnesota Twins. Look, I get it. 10-0. They rode the fattest wave, and they've got some pretty bulging sausages right now. I respect the sausage. I do. Congrats. 10-0. But you did it against the White Sox twice and the Angels in between. Let's take a deep, bloody breath. You did not beat the Braves, and you did not beat the Dodgers, and you didn't beat the Oakland Athletics, all right? You guys got a really soft schedule for 10 days, and you capitalized. Good job, Twins. You beat the teams you were supposed to beat, and I just can't stress that enough. But I'll be honest with you, I was looking at that Angels series, expecting the Angels to cool them off and put them back into a certain kind of place, and it didn't happen. And now, yeah, you know, the offense may be getting going, and Eder Julian is playing great, and Carlos Correa may be on the way back, and Carlos Santana might be mashing his fair share of hard hit balls and creating some good offense. Like, I like the Twins, as I've said before, and I wouldn't hate it if they do have a redemption arc that sticks past this week. But do not pretend that they are not in for stiff challenges from Boston and Seattle. One of the better, I should say, offensive lineups of the last several weeks, especially, and projected across the season, I understand. But one of the best offensive lineups is about to face the two best ERAs in baseball as a staff. So, huge test for Minnesota. Huge, huge, huge. And coming off the limp, wet noodle schedule they just had, I do not put it past them to come out looking a little bit more human. Actually, a lot more human this time next week. But it was cute. Enjoy being the first ever covering our bases power rankings champions, Twins. Shake your hands over that. That
Yeah,
is
don't eat the
commendable.
sausage, Twins. Don't do it.
Yeah, well, don't. Definitely don't. And don't beat us in Seattle either. I won't be happy about that. Actually, it's in Minnesota. I'm excited for that series. 4 games too. It's going to be a good test for both teams. Maybe, yeah, it'll be an interesting offense to try to outrun from Seattle. But we've done it, Dan. All 30 teams ranked. We will, of course, find a way to share with you our silly group and order to things. Who'd have thought the Tampa Bay Rays would kick things off at 30 and that the Twins would be at first? I think these two teams were really in the same place in the barrel for us last week, right?
Yeah.
Our previous set. So, proof why you play the games, why you record the pods. Everything's a little strange in covering our bases land, but I'm proud to be doing it. It's been a blast chatting with you, Dan. On deck as we get ready for the next set of games, there's some really exciting series. I mentioned it just seconds ago, but Atlanta and the Dodgers are getting ready to get going, and you better be ready to watch that. San Diego and Arizona are revving up. We've got Milwaukee and Chicago. Any series coming up for you, Dan, that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to tune into the Los Angeles Angels at Pittsburgh. A couple teams that have been struggling, see how they do over there. And Toronto at Philly, a couple slugging teams. I think that could be some high scoring games in that series. Should be fun.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited. Hey, how come you don't ever want to undercook a marlin, Dan?
I don't know why.
Because you might AJ puke.
Oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask us a question or give us feedback, email us at coveringOurBases@gmail.com, and be sure to check out the full episode on YouTube every week on our channel, Covering Our Bases. For our YouTubers, give us a like, give us a share, give us a subscription. Tell your friends that we are doing it pretty cool and groovy over here at Covering Our Bases. And that from Mets to Mariners, you're having a blast listening to us break down all of the latest headlines and storylines across the league. More patterns, more cruddy umpires, more power rankings are coming up next week with more coverage. Give us a like and some comments if you're agreeing with our rankings. I'm sure you all had Atlanta at number 7, wherever we had them, something silly like that. But it's been a blast chatting with you. Anything for our fans before we go, Dan?
Thanks, guys, for tuning in for a long one, and hope you got some good information out of it. Keep coming back for more.
That's right. We'll see you guys next time we take a trip around the bases.